Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Mommy, Mary whimpered, following her mother across the hot asphalt. I'm hot. I'm tired. Can we rest, please? I can't walk anymore. I want to go home. Stop begging. Jenna told her sternly, we have to buy everything, or when will we ever get to the market again? It's the beginning of the school year, and we're not ready. Just be patient. It's not much longer. I'm tired too, but I'm not complaining. You're walking light, and I'm carrying heavy bags. There's no time to rest. The bus won't wait. Can't we just sit down for a little while, please? I'm thirsty. I want ice cream. Can I avoid it and buy some for me and you? Come on, Mommy. Her daughter persuaded her. I said no. There's only a few more things left on the list. Here you go. The woman stopped, shoved a piece of paper under the girl's nose, written in a beautiful teacher's handwriting. Almost everything is already. Be patient a little. You are already 7 years old, and you complain like a little girl. You want to be the first student at school, don't you? We'll buy you a backpack. You can choose whatever you want. I don't want to go to school. Tears came to Mary's eyes. I want to go home. I'm tired. I'm hot. My legs can't walk anymore. Why are you so sad? Her mother looked back at her. Let's go and pick out some boughs. You can buy the ones you like. Look. She stopped at the counter littered with colorful boughs and rubber bands. Do you like these? Mary looked intently at the merchandise. Jenna, trying to distract her daughter, slipped her one bough or the other. Do you want white ones with beads? You'll be the prettiest girl in the class. All the boys will only look at you. Shall we? Okay, Mom, will you buy me ice cream? With hope in her voice, the girl asked. That's it. Relieved, sighed Jenna, paying the seller. Now you can have a popsicle. Yes, I'll buy you ice cream. Look where they sell it. Are you getting your daughter ready for school? The seller looked at her understandingly, hiding the money in her purse. Yes, the woman smiled. It's hot today as if it wasn't the end of August. I left all my money at the market. She shook her head. Everything is so expensive. Children are expensive. Nodded, agreeing seller. Well, Jenna turned to her daughter. Tell me, what kind of ice cream do you want? The girl rejoiced, grabbed her mother's hand, and pulled her towards the tent, which had ice cream written in large letters on the sign. Mother and daughter made their way to the ice cream maker, a young brisk girl fleeing the scorching rays of the sun under a huge umbrella. I'd like an ice cream cone in a cup. Mary was immediately amused, her fatigue lifted like a hand. Can you buy me a soda with syrup, Mom? It's all sweet, smiled her mother, handing over the money. So what? But it's delicious. The girl impatiently watched as the girl seller leisurely pulled out cups and paper wrapping. Thank you, the girl said, grabbing the ice cream and squeezed her eyes shut with pleasure, taking a bite of the cool treat. That's it, I'm exhausted. Jenna sank down heavily on the bench and, following her daughter's example, also took the ice cream. I can't believe we bought everything. It was like a mountain had fallen off my shoulders. Now we can go home. My dad is probably waiting for us. Let's get some rest. Mary said, Okay, we'll sit, but we have to catch the bus, so watch the clock. Jenna lazily looked at the people walking around the market and was glad that she had time to do everything she wanted to do. Suddenly, her gaze stopped on a gypsy woman who was looking around, saying something quickly to a beautiful girl, holding her hand, who listened, nodding her head obediently. Oh, what's she doing? Jenna said angrily, noticing that the girl had taken money out of her purse and handed it to the gypsy. She instantly hid it in the folds of her oversized skirt. Look at her. She's going to take her for a ride, and not a single policeman around. Who? Mary looked at her mother in bewilderment. Look, the girl. You nomadic tribe of gypsies. I'll show you how to lead honest people by the nose. Jenna jumped up from the bench. Mary, you stay here. Don't you dare go anywhere. Guard the shopping, you understand? I'm gonna take care of this cheater. She strode briskly toward the strange couple. Meanwhile, the girl, apparently having emptied her purse, took a gold bracelet off her wrist and was about to give it to the gypsy when an angry Jenna intercepted her hand. What are you doing, you fool? She looked at the girl reproachfully. She shook her head, as if waking up from a dream, and stared fearfully at her protector. Didn't your father and mother teach you not to trust gypsies? Why are you squandering expensive gifts? Give it back to the girl, Jenna said angrily, turning to the gypsy and grabbing her hand, which she used to snatch the bracelet. Don't touch me. Rose shrieked and wanted to hide it, but Jenna grabbed her firmly with one hand and with the other tried to snatch the jewelry from the deceiver. Tell her, tell her. Looking back at the girl, the gypsy shouted, You gave it to me for the job. I told you the truth. I didn't conceal anything. I'm a third-generation fortune teller. I know everything. I see through everyone. Yes, I gave it to you. The frightened girl mumbled, Oh, why did I give it to you? She looked at the women and at the bracelet. My father gave it to me. He will take off my head for it. Please return it. The fortune teller whimpered. You're stupid, shouted Jenna. She put noodles on your ears, and you're happy. You spent money. You probably didn't earn it yourself. Give me the bracelet, you shameless girl. The woman pushed the gypsy woman. She shook and let go of the jewelry. Take it back. Jenna handed the expensive item to the owner. And run away from here, but do not get caught in the net of these deceivers. They'll rip you off like a stick. Why do you mind your own business? A gypsy woman flew up to her, grabbed her by the hair, and started to rub her. You bastard! Jenna also grabbed her abuser's hair. Don't you dare cheat, girls. Go to work. I'll call the police. You don't think you've got any control. None of your business. The gypsy woman squealed, trying to drop the woman to the ground. Stay out of the way. Her companions jumped up and started to separate them. Rosa, Rosa, stop. Stop her. Let's get out of here. Why did you fight with her? The three of us tried to hold her down, but she lunged like a lioness, lunging at Jenna. You'll remember me. Fixing her hair and breathing heavily, the gypsy woman said, You have no conscience. Barely catching her breath, the woman replied. She wanted to fix her hair, but then she unclenched her fist and was stunned. A strand of black hair was stuck between her fingers. Damn you, damn you, damn you. Spinning her eyes frantically, the gypsy woman shouted, shook her fists above her head, and spat in Jenna's direction. Your unfortunate daughter, because of you will be. The one she loves with all her heart will die in agony. He will take the curse upon himself. Then my words will be dispelled. No one has ever humiliated Rosa like that. You'll pay for your words. You'll pay in full. You'll wash your tears away. Many times you'll remember me and regret that you messed with me. All the participants of the fight at these words froze as if struck by thunder. What are you, that you will bring trouble on yourself? Hissed at her co-workers. Let's go away. Leave her alone. The gypsies left, loudly, continuing to talk in their own language, and Jenna could not come to her senses for some time. The curse words rang in her ears. When she woke up, she shook the stranger's hair from her hand squeamishly and made her way to her daughter. Mommy, Mary asked her fearfully, "Why did you fight with your aunt?" "I wanted to punish her for cheating," tiredly answered Jenna. She took out a wet napkin and wiped her face and hands, trying to get rid of unpleasant memories. All the way Mary slept. Rose's angry face kept popping up in her sleep. The girl shuddered and woke up. "Calm down, my little one," said her mother, hugging her by the shoulders and pressing her to herself. "It's only a dream." And she herself, in anxiety, remembered an unpleasant scene at the market. The bus stopped. People reached for the exit. "Why are you both so glum?" Taking the bags, the father asked, meeting the family at the bus stop. "I'll tell you at home." Tiredly, Jenna replied, "We've had too much running, and it's stuffy on the bus. We got carsick, and the bags are heavy. But at home is good. I set the table." "Thank you. I thought I wouldn't make it." "Mom saved my aunt from a gypsy," Mary said cheerfully, jumping up and down. "Look at that." Her mother nodded at her. "How long has it been since she fell down from fatigue? And now she's as good as a cucumber. I wish I were like that." "What's this Gypsy story?" asked the father. He opened the door, letting his wife into the house. "Oh, let me at least breathe a little," Jenna begged. She sank down on the couch in the living room. "Thank God I'm home. I thought I was gonna die on the way. Wash your hands and get to the table," the master commanded. A little refreshed after the trip, mother and daughter gladly sat down at the table. "Do you realize how insolent these gypsies are?" Jenna told me. "They took the girl's head off, ripped her off. Why should I stand aside? I rushed to her aid and fought her off. What a mother you are!" Husband grinned. "You found someone to mess with. They are in the business." "Mom is our hero," Mary said proudly. She clung to the Gypsy's hair and wouldn't let go. "Yeah, but now she's not happy she interfered." "Why is that?" "She put a curse on Mary, so." The man dismissed it. "It's all fairy tales. You're a modern woman. Do you really believe the words of some gypsy woman?" "What can words do? Think about it." "Nonsense. Spit and forget it." "Don't tell me." Jenna looked at her husband with a concentrated gaze. "What if it's true? What if it comes true?" "I'm afraid I'm for Mary. After all, she said that the daughter's fiancé will die in agony. Then the curse will be lifted." "Stop talking nonsense," Father shouted. "And you, Mary, don't listen to what your mom is saying. It's a gypsy who shouted in her heart to scare you. You're the one who deprived her of a client. So what if the groom dies?" He laughed. "We'll find her another one, won't we, daughter? What a beauty is growing up here. We'll have no shortage of suitors." "How can you say that?" Jenna was really upset. And if it's true, what if it comes true? "What have I done?" "I've had enough of you and your curses. Think less about it and you'll be fine. If you want to believe the gypsy woman's words so much, remember that thoughts are material. Put this nonsense out of your head, forget it and be done with it." Jenna did try to forget the story over time, but Mary kept thinking about the gypsy's words. "Mary, why are you sad?" My father asked. "Are you sitting at home, not going anywhere with your girlfriends? It's boring to spend all your time at school books." "I do not want," replied the girl indifferently. She after this trip, as if replaced. Mother lamented. "Has the curse already begun to work? I've brought misfortune on my daughter." "What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" Angry father. "Are you already obsessed with this story? You see curses everywhere. Now because of this to stay at home all my life. Daughter, you should at least go to the movies. Why don't we all go together?" Mother suggested it. "I can't." Mary refused. "I have a lot of homework. Go without me." What are we going to do with her? Jenna sighed sorrowfully. She locks herself in her room and sits there like an owl, thinking and thinking, but she won't tell me what she's thinking. Mary, she begged her, talk to me. What's eating you? I'm a mother. I'll help you. I'll advise you. I'm afraid. The girl confessed. What are you afraid of? What if the Gypsy woman's curse comes true? I'll never be able to get married. Silly girl, everything will be all right. Now I regret telling you about the curse. Don't worry about it. It's just words. Father's right, and nothing more. Look how long it's been since that day, and everything is fine in our family. Forget it. Nothing terrible will happen to you. I promise you. But the thoughts of that story never let Mary go. Only when she became an adult, she gradually calmed down. She remembered the Gypsy woman's words less and less often. Maybe it's really nothing. She calmed herself down. No, yes, I return in my thoughts to the old story. It's really time to forget. I will not torment myself and start my life with a clean slate. Time passed, and the girl finally believed that the curse did not work. Have you changed your mind about going to medical school? Her friends asked her at the graduation party. No, I've wanted to be a doctor and save people for a long time. I want to go to the city. There are so many opportunities there. Isn't it a shame to throw away 6 years of your life? Saving people's lives is not an easy task. It takes a lifetime to learn. Mary was philosophizing, which made her classmates sad. You're a fool, Mary. The best years will pass you by. Nothing mine will not leave me. The girl smiled. I'll make up for it. Together with her friends, she went to the city to enroll, but in the first year she failed to pass the exams. Mom, I failed the exam. Mary cried into the telephone receiver. It's a shame. It's just a little short. I wanted to get in so badly. Mary soothed her mother. Maybe it's for the best. Pack up and come home. Why should you stay in the city in rented corners? Here you'll get a job. No worries with us. Mary was ashamed to return home, but she overpowered herself. She understood her mother was right and did not linger in the city. Well, this university. Rejoiced by the return of his daughter, said the father, you'll work, and then maybe you won't want to go anywhere else. Well, no, firmly answered the daughter. I will work, and in the evenings to prepare for enrollment. I'll still get my way. You cannot talk me out of it. Why are you stubborn? The mother wailed. You didn't enroll right after school. Do you think you'll get wiser in a year? I'll get in anyway. You'll see. The girl did not give in to persuasion, stood her ground. She spent her days in the library reading textbooks. And why do you go to the library? Parents asked. You could sit at home and prepare yourself. Why are you inventing? I can't do it at home, but the reading room disciplines me. You'll soon collapse from fatigue. In the evenings, Mary worked in a cafe as a waitress. If only she could go out with her friends on her day off. Her father persuaded her, but Mary refused all the tempting offers. She stubbornly prepared for admission and was not going to give up. A girl? She heard one day when she was serving tables in a cafe. We've been waiting for the order to arrive for a long time. Could you please find out what the delay is? Mary turned around at the voice and blushed. A handsome young man was looking at her sternly. Dark curly hair was neatly enrolled back, but a knotty strand constantly fell on his forehead, from which the young man, from time to time, threw her head back. Brown eyes with interest followed the girl. I'll ask. Embarrassed, said Mary and hurried to the kitchen. What's wrong with you? The shift attendant asked cheerfully, noticing how excited the girl was. Did you see a ghost? No. Barely catching her breath, she answered. There are young people waiting for the order for a long time. We'll fix that now. The waitress easily picked up the tray, and in 2 minutes, Mary could hear her laughing, flirting with the young men. She watched enviously as the girl interacted easily with the customers. Mary barely made it to the end of her shift. In every spare minute, the image of the laughing, handsome man surfaced in front of her. You can't think about him. She reprimanded herself. Preparing for admission, that's what should worry her now. But her poor heart wouldn't listen to reason. Bye. She waved to her colleagues and stepped into the darkness of the evening. Mary was in a hurry to get home. Girl. She heard a familiar voice behind her and her heart beat fast. May I meet you? Mary looked back at her, smiling broadly, looked at the young man, who for the first time in her life brought confusion to a soul that had never been touched by first love. Excuse me. On the move, she replied. I'm in a hurry. My mom doesn't want me to talk to strangers. I can't let you down. I've got a car. He grabbed her arm, stopping her. Come on. Don't be afraid of me. I don't hurt the little ones. I'm not afraid. I just really don't have time. Sit down. The stranger opened the car door in front of her. I'll take you wherever you want to go, and we'll get acquainted. Your blue eyes pierced through my heart. I can't think of anyone but you. I barely waited for your shift to end. Are you laughing? Not at all. He's suddenly serious. I've really been thinking about you since the first moment I met you. I always thought that only happened in books. You don't believe me. You don't know me at all. Maybe I'm a quarrelsome, insufferable person or an arrogant, greedy upstart. I don't know. The young man nodded in agreement. But my sixth sense tells me that fate itself has given me the gift of meeting you, which means that you can be neither arrogant nor quarrelsome. Are we going, or are you running through the dark streets alone? Still hesitating, Mary glanced at her watch. I'm late today, and my parents are probably worried. Let's go. It's faster to drive than to walk. That's great. The young man was happy. It is dangerous for a girl to walk alone in the evening streets, even if you know them from childhood. The young man drove confidently. What is your name, beautiful stranger? Without taking his eyes off the road, he asked. Mary. The girl answered, embarrassed. She still could not believe that she was riding in a car with a man, and even with the one who had occupied her thoughts all evening. And me, David. Isn't it scary coming home so late? No, I'm used to it. What, you don't have another job? My schedule suits me. I have more time to study during the day. Are you studying? No, I didn't get in. So I'm sitting at my books, so I can get in next year for sure. The young people chatted merrily. Time flew by. Well, I'm home, reported Mary. David reluctantly stopped the car. I hope I'm not crossing some hot fan if I ask permission to walk you again tomorrow. I have tomorrow off. Mary smiled. I'll get some sleep. That's wonderful. David cheered. I have the day off too. I don't want to leave you guys. Let's go to the city tomorrow, to the amusement park. Only in the evening. I'm studying at the library during the day. Okay, then I'll call you. I'll call you. Mary nodded. They exchanged phone numbers. David helped the new acquaintance out of the car and escorted him to the porch. Mary, do you want me to take a call? I accept. The girl smiled. She wanted to open the door, but suddenly David leaned over and lightly touched her lips with his lips. Mary did not recoil. She was pleased by the man's touch. I want you to think about me all night. Quietly he spoke. The girl disappeared behind the door, and David still did not leave and did not leave. He could still taste her kiss on his lips. The young man suddenly jumped up, laughed, and ran to the car. From that day on, the young people hardly ever parted. Mary? Jenna asked. Are you too serious about David? Yes, Mommy. I'm so happy. He's so good, so kind, so attentive. A courteous young man who loves you. You might even get married, but it's too early for you. And if the children come right away. Mom, we're not going to get married yet. I have to study, you know. When I graduate, then we can think about getting married. And not right away, because I have 6 years to study at university, and I'm not going to give up my plans. She didn't tell her mother that David wasn't thrilled that she wanted to go to university. Why would you want to go to university? He was puzzled. A woman has a home to run. What does it matter if you have an education or not? Is it higher or secondary? You can find a job even without education. We will raise agriculture in the village. Working hands are worth their weight in gold here, or you'll go to the city and won't want to come back. You'll forget me. You'll meet some city beauty and leave me, a provincial. Why do you say that? I love you. Don't you understand? The girl was bitter. I have dreamed since childhood to become a doctor and then go to work in a big city. We could go together. Can you imagine how great it would be? I'll definitely become a famous doctor. You'll be proud of me. Think about it. There are hundreds of people like you in the big city. Do you think you'll get a job in a good clinic? What am I going to do? You'll have to rent an apartment, and here you have your parents' house and me. We'll build our own, have kids. What else do you need in life? But there are no prospects here. The hospital is small. The medical equipment is outdated. I dream of working in a modern hospital. What's the use of studying? I was angry, David. The main thing is to be together. I think a woman should be self-sufficient. Why? It's up to the man to create a good environment for a woman. Listen, Mary, when you and I get married, and we will, as soon as you're 18, I want you to put school out of your mind. I'll provide for you. You won't need anything. A woman's main purpose is family. My darling. Mary laughed and kissed the young man. I won't be able to stay at home. I like to treat people, and no one can dissuade me from going to university, not even you. I love you, but I dream of being an independent woman and securing a good future for myself. Only then will I feel truly happy. You don't trust me. Why wouldn't I trust you? Why do you say that? I just don't want to turn into a sackcloth. Can't I fulfill my dream? What kind of a house party are you having? Such quarrels happen quite often, but the young people after a quarrel immediately made peace, and nothing could disturb their happy life. Mary's birthday was coming up. How shall we celebrate it? David asked. 18 years doesn't happen every year. Shall we go to a restaurant in town? Let's go to the countryside. Mary suggested. She had already passed her university exams and was waiting for admission. The weather's great. It's a day off. Shall we invite some friends? I don't want to go to a restaurant. You'll throw away money, but you won't have any fun. You can't step here. You can't say so. I want to go simple. All right, David agreed. Shish kebabs, so shish kebabs, the birthday girl orders music. On the weekend, they went to the riverbank. The weather was perfect, sunny, no wind, warm water beckoned to them. Lucky you, Mary. Her friends envy her. David, he can't take his eyes off you. He's such a guy. How many girls were pining for him? And he only thinks about you. It's like you meet by chance and fall in love. I thought you could only dream of such love. Why don't we go for a swim? Suddenly someone suggested it. The whole group went into the water. Guys, how about a race to the middle of the river? Suggested one of the young men. Like children. The girls laughed. What are you thinking of? Let's go to the table. The kebab is getting cold. now." David looked back at Mary, entering the water. "Let's swim in and sit down at the table. It's very hot. I don't want to leave the water. Would you like to freshen up? We'd rather look at you," answered Mary, admiring her chosen one. "Mary," shouted one of the disputants. "Command. 1, 2, 3. Mary commanded, and the boys swam off, parting the water with strong sweeps of their arms. "Look, Mary," said her friend cheerfully. "You're ahead of the pack, you handsome fellow, and the others are not lagging behind." The girl stood up for her friends, and her soul was singing. My most beloved, my most desired, my dearest." Mary, smiling, watched how stubbornly David kept the lead. The young men were already swimming back, as suddenly the head of his beloved disappeared under the water. The girl continued to smile and waited that he was about to surface from the water. Triumphant victory. But a second and another passed, and he was still gone. "David!" The girl cried out and ran to meet the swimmers. "What are you doing, Mary?" Her friends rushed after her. "What happened?" "Help! Call an ambulance!" Mary screamed, rushing to the water. David's friends, breathing heavily, were already coming out of the river. "Why are you yelling?" Barely catching his breath, one David asked. He had dived in, and that was it. He was nowhere to be found. "Something happened. Hurry up." The guys rushed to help, dived several times before they carried the breathless body of their buddy to the shore. An ambulance was already rushing to their aid. "Doctor, how is he?" Mary asked, watching anxiously as the doctors tried to bring the young man back to consciousness. He had already opened his eyes, but still had difficulty understanding what had happened. "It's all right, it's all right. We'll take him with us, watch him for a couple days. He swallowed a lot of water. Good thing we got him to shore in time. Don't worry, he'll be fine. The medics have put him on a stretcher." "Mary," David said in a weak voice, helplessly, looking at her and squinting at the sun. "I'm all right now. Have you frightened us?" Early hot tears on the snow-white sheet that the young man was covered with, said the girl. "I'm sorry. I spoiled your holiday. I'm really ashamed of myself. We wanted to amuse you a little, and it turned out to make you cry. It's nothing. The important thing is that you're alive. I should have listened to you and gone to the restaurant. Then nothing would have happened." "That's strange." David's friends didn't understand. "He's the best swimmer among us. What happened to him? Did he overheat in the sun?" They put it down to fatigue and heat. Try not to swim in the heat. David, the attending physician, admonished him. Next time there might not be any saviors around. Take care of yourself. 2 days later, the young man was discharged from the hospital, and gradually the unpleasant incident was forgotten. "Mary?" One day David told the girl, "The guys invited me to take part in a motorcycle race. Do you know how to ride a motorcycle?" The girl was surprised. "Of course, I and the guys at school, we were fond of it. Even in the city races participated. Then, however, abandoned and sold the motorcycle. The car switched to a car, and here I got the opportunity to ride, to remember how we used to race. My friend talked me into it and gave me his motorcycle. It's a sin to refuse such an offer. I wanted to feel the speed again. Is it okay that you haven't ridden a motorcycle for a long time? It's nothing. I'll ride the day before, and I'll remember. I just need to get a feel for the technique. Are you coming to watch? I'd love it if you met me at the finish line." "Yeah." Mary clapped her hands together. "I'd love to see you. I admit I've never been on a motorcycle, but I've dreamed of riding one. Then we'll meet on Sunday. We'll go to the country. There's a track, and then I'll take you for a spin. You'll ask me to teach you how to drive a motorcycle. The girl was looking forward to the day off. In the morning, they drove towards the place where the motocross was held. There were people standing along the track, eagerly waiting for the race to start. Mary stood at the finish line to meet David. Right after the race, she heard the start announced and, infected by the general cheering, eagerly watched for her favorite racer to show up. She watched the first riders finish the race and waited for the familiar motorcycle to appear. Oh, look! She heard it suddenly beside her. She felt the crowd stirring. Something had happened. An ambulance had gone to the highway. Mary's heart gave an anxious, twitching thump. Had someone crashed? She asked. Probably should ask the organizers. Someone has definitely crashed. The next ambulance is on its way. It's not necessarily a racing driver. Maybe someone in the audience got sick. Yeah, at the races every year someone goes off the track, just not to their death. The girl with difficulty got through the crowd to the finish line, tried to find out what happened. Racers one by one crossed the finish line. Only David was missing. Tell me, she rushed to the organizers. Were any of the riders hurt? A girl. A middle-aged man in a tracksuit tried to brush her off. We have no right to give such information. What are you, a journalist? No, I'm David's fiancée. She said the young man's last name. The man looked at her sympathetically and said, It's bad luck for your boy. He's out of the race, and he was among the leaders all the time. Where is he? What hospital did they take him to? Don't worry about it. It was just bumps and bruises. The man reassured her. But Mary, tears streaming down her cheeks, was already running to the cab rank. Doctor. She caught the head of the department in the hospital corridor. What about David? Lucky guy, the doctor said glumly. No fractures, but he'll have to stay with us. Can I see him? He was about to forbid, but looking at the girl's crying face, changed his mind. You can, but not for long. He treated bruises and wounds, injected anesthetic. Let him rest. Mary cautiously entered the room. David was lying in bandages, his face covered with abrasions and bruises. David, the girl whispered, approaching him. My darling. The boy could hardly open his eyes. Mary, have you come? I wanted to hug you at the finish line. He tried to smile. I overestimated my strength. My self-confidence failed me. I thought I would get on the bike and everything would come back to me at once, but I should have practiced. Without training, you shouldn't go to the track. I upset you again. It's okay. You'll do it next time. She ran her hand through his hair, leaned over and kissed him on the lips. Just get well soon. The doctor forbade to talk to you for a long time. Rest, and tomorrow I'll come again. Okay, I'll miss you. Me too, get well. I love you. Love you. David was discharged 2 weeks later. He immediately arranged a meeting with Mary in a cafe, and the lovers couldn't stop talking. Mary looked at him affectionately, and the young man did not let her hand out of his hands. David? The girl suggested. My parents have long wanted to meet you. Maybe on the weekend we can get together at our place? I'm going to start school soon, but while I'm free, why don't we get together? You'll be a guest. You'll get your strength back. I don't mind. David replied. That's great. I'll tell my parents to expect a guest this weekend. They received a warm welcome. Jenna put together a rich table so that the future son-in-law and the parents had no doubt that the wedding was coming if they came to get acquainted, was satisfied with the meeting. Mom, Dad, this is my David. Mary, glowing with happiness, introduced the young man. Glad to meet you. Shaking hands, said the father. He liked the young man immediately. Now there will be someone to go to the sauna and drink beer with, because with this woman's kingdom, no pleasure from life will not get. What are you talking about, Father? Jenna looked at him reproachfully. What will David think of us? Why? Don't tell me you don't go to the sauna or drink beer. Suspiciously, he looked at the young man. Why not? David was embarrassed. In good company, I don't mind. That's what I understand, man. His father rejoiced and everyone laughed. David was embarrassed at first, but then he calmed down. Everyone talked and laughed happily, and the young man felt like a part of the family. What good parents you have, David remarked, and they love you very much. Yes, I love them very much too, and they liked you, she declared. Finally, September came, and Mary started school. The young people visited their parents less often. Mary, one day the mother called. We had a hurricane here, made a mess of things. A tree fell on the neighbor's roof, and our slate was blown away. My father can't cope alone. If you and David could come and help us. It's going to rain soon. I'm afraid it'll flood the whole attic. Mary took a leave of absence from the university and arrived at her parents' house that afternoon. David, too, put all his work aside and came to help. While the men were re-roofing the roof, the women were busy in the kitchen, heating the stove. The men were talking about something. Watch out! Suddenly they heard their father shouting. The women heard a sheet of iron hit the roof, followed by a thud. Something sprinkled and rang. You punishment. Mother, Mary, hurry. David fell from the roof. Mary jumped out first. David was sitting on the ground, pale, frightened, and gently supporting his arm. David, what's wrong? The girl rushed to him. My arm. Writhing in pain, the young man said, It seems to be broken. Why didn't you? The boy's father. Jenna wailed. He came to help and almost got killed. What a disaster. You should have hired some outside men. You gotta pay men. Justified the father, looking at David confused. And the job was easy. Who knew that it would end like this? I haven't had much luck lately. David lamented, getting into the ambulance that Mary had called. She'd come with him. I accidentally stumbled and fell. I don't know what's wrong. But I do. Mary thought to herself, but she didn't say anything to the young man. Your fiancé will have to stay here tonight. Why? David tried to object. Just put a plaster cast on him and he's fine. Maybe you have a concussion. I don't like the way you look. The doctor said. It's worth a follow-up. Mary went home alone. How embarrassing in front of the boy. Shaking her head, her mother said as the family gathered around the table. Good thing he only broke his arm. Lucky, you might say. Is it a joke to fall from such a height? Oh, my father didn't save the boy. What if he'd been killed? What's it got to do with me? I've been on the roof too, and it's okay. It's just a matter of fate. Mary? Asked Jenna, the daughter, when they were alone. Why are you so thoughtful? It's all right. It's not a hard fracture. It'll heal, and she won't remember. Things happen in life. If you knew where you'd fall, you'd have made a bed. Mother? Mary looked at her mother anxiously. I think it's the Gypsy's curse that's beginning to take effect. Are you out of your mind? It's been years. I don't believe it. It can't be. So what if I fell down? Who knows? It's the third time he's fallen over recently. And Mary told her mother about how the young man almost drowned and then almost crashed his motorcycle. Oh boy! Jenna exclaimed. I'd forgotten about the curse. I thought it hadn't come true, but there it was. What should I do, Mom? The girl asked in despair. What to do is to find a Gypsy and ask her to remove the curse. And where to look for her? I don't remember her at all. Only her name, Rosa. I think we should go to Lisa. They say she can lift even the strongest curse. Mary didn't sleep much that night. She was afraid for David, but she didn't know what to expect from Lisa. Come in, beautiful. Don't be shy. Lisa smiled in a friendly manner and pointed to the chair opposite her. What was it? What will be? What will soothe my heart? I'll tell you everything. What has happened to such a young girl? I see the sadness in your eyes. Tell me what's on your mind. Just tell me what's on your mind. Otherwise, I can't help you. Can you lift the curse? I asked Mary, quiet. Lisa shouted at her. Don't talk loudly. Tell me what the curse is. And Mary told the story in detail. Her name was Rose. The girl finished her story. I don't remember her much. I was little. Oh, my golden girl? The gypsy woman shook her head sadly. I will try, of course, to help you, but the problem is that the curse is directed not at you, beautiful girl, but at the man who will love you. You got a fiancé, you love him. I have a fiancé, that's why I'm here. He's been having one misfortune after another lately. So far, it's been limited to various injuries, but I'm afraid it'll end in tragedy someday. I'll never forgive myself if he dies. Help me. Tell me what to do. I'll pay anything. I'll pay any money. Just save me. Get rid of the curse. My diamond. Lisa shook her head. Sometimes money is powerless. Give me your hand. Beautiful, I can tell your fate by your hand. Lisa took Mary's hand, looked at the lines on it for a long time, then whispered something to herself. Then she lit a candle, took a small bundle of some herb from the shelf, set it on fire, and with the smoke began to fumigate the girl. She walked around her and said something. Mary was frightened, trembling with excitement, the smell of smoke, and a headache. At last Lisa fell on a chair, put her hands on the table, dropped her head on them and lay like that. The girl was afraid to move. I'm sorry, my good girl. At last the gypsy woman spoke, raising her head. I couldn't remove the spoil. Your Rosa is a real witch. I'm weak against her. The woman confessed. What can I do? Mary said in despair. Tears came to her eyes. There are two ways out. Answered the gypsy woman. Either you'll spend the rest of your life with your husband, if you marry for love, or look for someone who will take away the curse. As soon as you choose him, you will get sick, wither, and it won't take long to get that. The gypsy woman pointed to the sky. Only you must love him, and he must love you truly. You can deceive yourself and people. Pretend that you love him, but you can't deceive the gypsy plot. It will still catch up with you. What's that? Mary's mouth is dry. I have to sacrifice the person I love. Otherwise, you won't get rid of the curse. The gypsy woman said firmly. I would rather not marry at all than sacrifice my beloved. She jumped up from her chair and ran out into the street. Mary? Her mother met her in the yard. What did Lisa say? Your face is gone. Mommy. The girl threw herself on her chest and sobbed. I'll have to suffer alone all my life. Lisa couldn't do anything to make me happy. The man I love must die for me. I can't let that happen. It's better to be alone than to pay such a sacrifice, and to marry someone I don't love. I don't agree either. To live with someone you don't love is nothing but misery. Daughter, Jenna was ready to burst into tears herself. Let's go home. Why are we standing in the street? We're bothering the neighbors. Tell me, what did she tell you? That's what she said. Mary was sobbing. The man I love with all my heart must die in agony. Only then the curse will lose its power, said Rosa, the real witch. What do we do now? Me, I'll chase David away. Let him go. Let him forget me. Let him live. How can you drive him away? He loves you madly. He'll never say no. I must make him leave my life forever. What a misfortune. My mother shook her hands. I wanted to help a man, but what misfortune did I bring on my own daughter? So don't believe in conspiracies. Should David tell her everything? No. The girl answered firmly. Then he will stay for sure. I must talk to him in such a way that he would leave and never even think of coming back to me. Mary stayed up half the night, crying, trying to find a way out of the situation. Realizing that she could not do otherwise, David must leave. She came to meet him from the hospital with a heavy heart. Mary! He welcomed her, opened his arms, and pressed her against him. I missed you so much. More than anything, I want to get in my car and drive away. I want to kiss you. He looked at her affectionately. David. The girl pulled away from him and tried to keep her voice cold. We need to talk. What's wrong, my love? He still continued to smile. You know that I can disperse any clouds gathered over your head with my bare hands. I'll tear them all apart for you. Let's go home. My parents aren't here yet, so we can talk about it. Good. I'm so happy to see you. He tried to kiss her, but Mary recoiled. Her heart was bleeding, but she knew she couldn't do otherwise. At home, she invited him to sit at the table and took a seat across from him. You and I must part. Mary said firmly. What do you mean? Break up? The smile slipped from his face. Are you out of your mind? We were getting married? I realize that my decision is unexpected for you, but I've thought it over. I have to get an education, and you will interfere with me. You're the one who said you're against me studying and then becoming a doctor. I'm not ready to sacrifice my ambitions. Mary, my dear Mary, David's talking to me like a little girl. I don't mind if you study, as long as that's the reason for the breakup. I don't want to lose you. I'll do whatever you want, and I won't interfere with your studies. But you shouldn't make such big decisions alone. We're adults. Let's talk about this together. You don't understand. Mary gripped the fingers of her hands tightly. We can't be together. I have a goal, and I'm going to it. You're an obstacle. I don't want to be distracted by anything else but my studies. We have different outlooks on life. I need another man who understands me and supports me in everything. Let's not torture each other. Let's part as friends. Every word was difficult for her. Tears were ready to spill out of her eyes, but she held on. Mary. The young man spoke quietly. What friends? We love each other. I see that you love me. I could not be mistaken. Why ruin everything? I don't understand. I don't have to explain anything to you. Coldly, the girl replied, Please go away and forget me. Find yourself another bride and be happy with her. But I don't want another. I can be happy only with you. Is there any other reason why you're driving me away? Frankly, I'm not convinced by your arguments. Study in peace if you want to. I'm not going to stop you. Why break up the relationship? What's gotten into you while I've been in the hospital? I'm not going anywhere. I want to stay with you. Go away. Coldly, Mary said and stood up. You are no longer welcome here. Forget about me forever. Okay, David stood up. If that's what you ask, I'll leave. I really hope you'll come to your senses and come back to me. Don't hope I won't come back. Mary, you're making a very big mistake. The girl was silent. She was afraid to raise her eyes to him. She knew that he would read in them very different words from those she had spoken aloud. The young man stood looking at her intently. Then he quickly gathered himself, got into his car, and drove away. Sobbing, Mary ran into the room, fell on the bed. Mary, her mother and father returned just after David had left. My poor little girl, Worried about her, cried Jenna. She stroked Mary's head, as in childhood, soothing, pitying. What agony you are taking. Cry? Cry, sweetheart. It'll be easier. Mommy, replied the girl, breaking away from the pillow and sitting down next to her mother. It will never be easier for me now. My heart breaks to pieces when I think about David. I don't know how I'm going to live without him. I want to die. What are you? What are you, sweetheart? Don't even think such thoughts. It's nothing. God willing, everything will pass. Everything will be over. The agony will be gone. The woman embraced her daughter, pressed her against herself, trying to share her pain. He'll hate me now. Well, let him, I don't care anymore. You'll meet another good man. Jenna was as comforting as she could be. A woman can't be alone. Well, you won't have a passionate love, so how many families live like that? Mary sat on the bed, staring thoughtlessly into the void. Her hands were resting on her lap. She didn't know how she would learn to live without David. Time heals. Mary knew that for sure. She went away to study with her friends in the dormitory. Lectures, seminars, library classes took up all her free time, but sometimes David came to her in her dreams and looked at her reproachfully. The girl woke up in tears, but did not give in to a moment of weakness, persistently devoted all her time to her studies. Mary more than once called out to her roommates. Shall we go to the club? Let's dance, relax. There are so many boys hanging out there. We'll get to know each other, have fun. How long can you sit your books? I don't go to clubs and I'm not going to meet anyone. Refused the girl and defiantly opened some textbook or notebook, using them as a shield from the annoying attention of neighbors. I don't understand. One of her friends was puzzled. How can you spend all your time with textbooks? Life is passing you by. Really, Mary? Another one echoed her. At our age, only to go out. But tell me, don't you want to meet some guy? Yes, she's afraid of them. The girls laughed. I'm not frightened, just my studies are in the first place. Calmly answered the girl, and she remembered how recently a classmate caught up with her after class. Mary, smiling, the guy suggested. Let's go to the movies. Sorry, I have a library in the evening. Screw the library, don't you have any other interests? I like it. Without stopping, the girl replied. Don't try. She heard the voice of another classmate. She's a bit of a prude. Maybe you're already married. So tell us, we'll understand. Or maybe you're sick. The guys laughed. None of your business. She snapped at them. Stay away from me. She's so formidable. Hey, hussy, you're really sick. Such beauty is wasted. Mary did not care about all these attacks. She was not going to open her soul to anyone and explain the reason for her closeness. A year of study flew by. The girl passed the last exam and decided to run into a cafe near the university. They sold delicious pastries. She made an order and sat down at the table. Can I keep you company? She suddenly heard and raised her head. A young man stopped next to her. His smiling blue eyes struck Mary so much that, without saying a word, she nodded her head, giving permission. I'm going. I see a pretty girl is bored. My name is Jordan. What's yours? Mary, but I'm not bored. A little tired after the exam. So you're a medical student? Yes, but I'm a long way from being a doctor. I've only finished one course. They talked for a while, then the girl stood up. Excuse me, I have to go. Wait, how come? Jordan was confused. Can I walk you out? I live nearby, in the dormitory. So what? I'll still enjoy walking with such a beautiful girl. Mary blushed. She liked this guy. She didn't expect to meet such a charming man, and she didn't want to part with him either. "Aren't you going to work?" "I have my own small firm, so I can afford to be late from lunch. No one will scold me." He smiled broadly, and Mary smiled. The next day, Jordan was waiting for her outside the dormitory with flowers. "I bought tickets for us," joyfully informed the young man. "I haven't been to the movie theater for a long time." "Thank you for getting me out of the house, or else I'm completely memorized." Gratefully, Mary smiled at him. When the light went out in the hall, Jordan boldly took Mary's hand. She did not resist. She was pleased with the touch of a young man. After the session, they walked back to the dormitory. "Did you like the movie?" Jordan asked. "Yes, very much. Thanks again for a wonderful evening, Mary," Jordan said, looking into her eyes as he drove away. "I'm so happy that fate brought us together. I've only known you for a day, but it feels like I've known you forever. That's never happened to me before. I'm so sorry to part with you. I'm ready to spend the whole night under the windows of your room, just to know that you are near." "I'm glad to meet you too," the girl confessed. "The girls and I are moving into an apartment tomorrow. It's the beginning of vacation, and we're staying to work. So you and I will still be able to see each other." Jordan was happy, and the young people swirled in the whirlpool of their feelings. They met almost every day. The relationship grew so fast that Jordan one day suggested, "Mary, why should you spend money on an apartment? Why don't you move in with me?" "I'm not comfortable." The girl was embarrassed. "We don't know each other very well. I want you around me 24 hours a day. Every time I say goodbye to you, I feel like we'll never see each other again. I want to wake up and fall asleep next to you. I'm sure that's what you want too. I think we should take our time." "Why wait? I love you and I'll never hurt you if you're afraid of that. Sometimes all it takes is one look to find your soulmate. Why wait years when it's so clear between us?" So Mary moved into his apartment, and they were really happy. Mary was studying. She had only a little time left to get her diploma. From time to time, she went home to see her parents. One day Jordan, as always, met his beloved at the train station. He got out of the car to meet her. "Darling, I have a surprise for you," he mysteriously informed her, kissing her on the cheek. "I love surprises," Mary replied. The young man pampered her, gave her jewelry, bought tickets to concerts of favorite artists, to the theater. The two of them could go for a weekend in the country to relax in nature. "Then let's hurry home. Tell me, what's the surprise? Please don't keep me waiting." Getting into the car, the girl persuaded him all the way home. "No way," answered Jordan. "I want to torture you a little." "Oh, you do?" Mary was jokingly angry. "So you like to torture me? You said you loved it." The young man stopped the car, turned to her, and looking straight into her eyes, said seriously, "I love you very much, but I still won't reveal the secret until later." Mary swung her fist at him. Laughing, exchanging jokes, they hurried home. "Close your eyes," Jordan asked as they entered the apartment. Mary obeyed, the smile never leaving her face as Jordan led her into the living room. "Now open them." "Jordan," the girl gasped, barely opening her eyes. "How wonderful." "What's the occasion? Did I miss something while I was visiting my parents? I couldn't have forgotten some important date, could I?" The table was set in the middle of the room, candles burning, flowers and vases everywhere. Jordan looked at her with a serious expression. "Mary, you and I have known each other for a number of years. I confess that I fell in love with you from the first moment I saw you in the cafe. I didn't dare to ask you to become my wife for a long time. I was afraid that you would refuse." He took a beautiful velvet box from the table, opened it, got down on one knee in front of the girl, but today I dared to ask, "Will you marry me?" Mary put the ring on her finger, took the head of her beloved in her hands, looked with tenderness into his blue eyes, and answered firmly, "Yes, I will be your wife." The young man stood up, embraced her, kissed her. God, I could not even dream that such a girl would give me her consent. They sat down at the table, raised glasses of champagne, congratulated each other. "Just do not persuade me to give up my studies and devote myself to housework." Mary wagged her finger at me. I had no such thoughts. I know what it means to do what I love. I think we'll get married after we get our diploma. Would that be okay? Thank you for understanding me. The girl smiled at him. It's very important for me to finish my studies. I have to match you. She laughed. It is unlikely that you will be interested with the wife of an understudy. I love you all kinds. Jordan said quietly, only if you were always with me. After the wedding, we will go on a trip. Where would you like to go? I don't know. With you, I could go to Antarctica to the penguins. We still have time to decide. You're my fiancé now. That's all I can think of. The happy celebration was just over a year away. Their little family lived a cloudless happiness. Every spare moment they tried to spend with each other. You've spoiled me completely. Mary jokingly criticized him when Jordan sat next to her in the evenings, took her in his arms like a little girl, wrapped her in a blanket and cradled her, enjoying the closeness. I want to feel you all the time, to hold you, to kiss you. Who knows how we will live on? He was thinking. And children will appear, there and in general time to be like this, one-on-one will not be. At such moments the girl leaned her head on the young man's shoulder and liked to listen to the beating of his heart. It seemed that nothing could overshadow their happiness. "Yes, my love." Mary answered the phone, but instead of Jordan's voice, she heard a complete stranger's. "Mary, we called you because your number is the last on the list of numbers of the man we found unconscious in the street." What? The girl felt a chilling fear creep into her heart. Where is he? What's wrong with him? He was found on the street by passers-by. He's in our hospital now. We need to confirm his identity. Mary dropped everything and went to the hospital. Barely waited to see the attending physician. They wouldn't let her into Jordan's room, only let her look through the glass. "Is this someone you know?" "Yes, he's not just an acquaintance, he's my fiancé. Can I stay with him?" "Wait for the attending physician, he'll explain everything." "Doctor, what's wrong? Why won't they let me see him?" The girl looked at the man in alarm. "He's still unconscious. There are no external injuries. We've examined him thoroughly." "Go home. When he comes to, we'll let you know." "No, I'll stay here and wait for him." "Is he going to be all right?" "Tell me, why did he lose consciousness?" "We don't know the cause yet, but we'll find out. We'll do an examination, then we can talk about the cause of the fainting." Jordan regained consciousness in the evening. Mary came right away. "How you frightened me." The girl cautiously entered the room and sat down beside her beloved, looking anxiously at his face. There was not a speck of blood on it. Blue eyes faded. "What did the doctor say?" "Nothing concrete yet. They ask a lot of questions." "Jordan's been sluggish. You must have overworked yourself, so your body malfunctioned. You'll be as good as new again." She ran her hand through his hair, down his cheek, took his hand. Her fingers were cold. "I guess I've run away." Suddenly Jordan said, "What are you talking about? There are good doctors here. They will definitely put you on your feet, establish the cause of fainting, and prescribe treatment. I'll come to see you every day. You just don't get discouraged. I know you men." She smiled approvingly. "She panics." On the third day, Mary got a call from the doctor asking her to come in. "Mary," he began. The girl suddenly realized that something irreparable was about to happen. "I have bad news. Jordan has brain cancer, terminal stage." She cried out, put her hand over her mouth. "I'm sorry about your fiancé, but there's nothing we can do for him." "I don't believe it." In despair, breaking her hands, said the girl, "You've made a mistake. Double-check the tests again. He was perfectly healthy. He never complained about anything. He's so young, it's a mistake, a mistake. He didn't complain. He didn't have to be healthy. This type of cancer is very insidious. A person may feel a slight indisposition and write it off as fatigue, a cold, but in the meantime the disease develops. Do you remember if he ever complained about anything in passing? Sometimes he'd say, Mary was thinking, that he had a headache. A month ago he complained that he couldn't see very well, as if his eyes were foggy, and I began to notice that he was bumping into furniture, doors, as if he was out of coordination. That's right. A person doesn't pay attention to such little things, and meanwhile the cancer is already gnawing at him. It's very aggressive. Is there nothing that can be done? Alas, the doctor waved his hands. It's too late. At this stage, all our efforts are for naught. Even abroad, no one will take him on. The tumor is not operable, and chemo is already useless, only to torment the patient. We'll support him, of course, but only to relieve the pain. Mary hesitated and then said with difficulty, "How long does he have left?" "Not long, I'm afraid. 3 months, 4 at the most." "I'm so sorry. Does Jordan know he's ill?" "Yes, we had to tell him. He needs to know what he's going through. Stay strong. Your support is very important to him right now." Mary walked out of the office exhausted, clamped her hands over her mouth, pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, and sobbed deeply. "No, this can't be true," she thought. "I don't want to lose him. How will I live without him? How will I look into his eyes? What will I say?" But she realized that she could not leave him at such a difficult moment, alone with the disease. With difficulty the girl pulled herself together and went to Jordan, hiding her tearful eyes. "Do you already know?" The reddened eyes and the mournful smile did not escape his inquisitive gaze. "I'm sorry I won't be able to carry you in my arms into our home, but I'm happy to have been by your side these past few years. I don't have much left in this world, but even at the last minute, I will remember every day I spent with you." "What are you saying?" whispered Mary, tears preventing her from looking at him. "We'll get through this. You can't leave me. It's not fair." "Unfortunately, nothing depends on us anymore. Soon I won't even be able to talk to you, and then I won't be able to feel anymore. I'll be there for you. I'll take a sabbatical and take care of you." "Thank you," Jordan said quietly. "I'm tired." He closed his eyes. Mary took his hand and pressed it to her lips. His once strong hand lay limply in hers. The girl had almost lived in the hospital, going to the apartment just to wash and pay the bills. She did not believe that all this was happening in Java, refused to accept the fact that Jordan had less and less strength every day. He was falling into oblivion more and more often. At such moments, Mary was overcome with despair. She cried silently, her heart racing. "Mary!" Suddenly she heard the quiet voice of her beloved. "Don't cry, please. It hurts me unbearably to see you like this. Forgive me." Wiping her tears, the girl whispered. Her lips trembled. She could not cope with the hopelessness that had seized her. "I won't cry anymore." She even tried to smile. "You know, I'm glad I was able to be happy, even if only for a short time. I'm grateful you're here with me now, not leaving me for dead. How could I? Because I love you. And I love you. I'm not afraid to die. I'm even looking forward to death. It will free me from pain. And you must live. Try to be happy. From up there in the sky, I'll watch over you and enjoy your happiness. I can't do it without you. Mary took his hands. They were icy. She pressed against them, trying to warm them. Hot tears flowed down her cheeks. Why should I live when you won't be there? Don't cry, my darling. We will all go away sometime. It's only a matter of time. We'll surely meet you later, up there in heaven. I'd love to see what you'll be like in your old age. He smiled. For 1 minute there were cheerful sparkles in his eyes, as before. Then Jordan's face was distorted with a grimace of pain. You go on tired. I want to be alone. He closed his eyes. Mary carefully got up, stood gazing into the pale native face, on which the disease had imprinted the imprint of hopelessness, and left. In the morning she awoke to a sharp phone call, grabbed the receiver, her heart clenched. Mary, I'm sorry for your loss. Jordan is gone. The girl buried herself in her pillow and screamed and cried. How could I not feel that he was saying goodbye to me? She scolded herself at the top of her voice. Left alone, didn't even say sorry, didn't even kiss him goodbye. Why? Why had it happened to him? Oh my God! I'll never see his smile again, never be able to talk to him again. How could I do that? Why? Finally the sobs subsided. Mary cried silently, and in her head she heard Jordan's voice and his last words. His smiling face stood before her as if alive. When she had cried all her tears, she fell into a heavy sleep. She vaguely remembered the day of the funeral, the people who had helped her. It seemed that together with Jordan, the life had gone out of her forever. She shriveled up, blackened with grief, did not react to the words of her friends and parents. She closed herself in her apartment and gave herself to grief alone. My daughter, her mother pleaded with her. Come home. How are you alone? No, Mom. Mary answered firmly. I have to finish my studies. I want to save people. I want to save people like Jordan. Recognize this terrible disease early so people don't die. I have to do this for his memory. He wanted me to graduate so badly, and I'll do it, no matter what it takes. But you're all alone out there, cried the mother, pitying her daughter. You'll come to your senses at home, and then you can go back to school. Listen to me. Your father and I are heartbroken for you. No, I don't want you to coddle me, pity me. I'm among my friends here. I'll go back to the dormitory. I've got 6 months left. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. I'm strong. If I didn't die at once with Jordan, I'll definitely survive now. Mary returned to the dormitory and plunged into her studies. After passing her final exams with flying colors, she asked to be sent home to work at the local hospital. Mary, her classmates called her. Shall we go to a restaurant? It's a big occasion, graduation. We'll all sit together. When else can we get together as a class? No, girls. Thanks for the invitation. I'm going home. Tickets are in my pocket. I can't stay here any longer. So many memories. Every street, every cafe, everything reminds me of Jordan. I want to forget everything and start living again. Home and walls help. The girl said goodbye to her friends and, having packed her suitcase, went to the bus station. She got off the bus at her station, breathed in the air familiar from her childhood. She smiled and walked towards home. When she got out on the station square, she looked around in search of acquaintances, but saw no one. Suddenly her gaze lingered on an old Gypsy woman. Her face seemed vaguely familiar to Mary. The girl stopped, looking at the woman stealthily, trying to figure out how she knew her. The Gypsy woman was staring at her too, as if waiting for the girl to finally recognize her and approach. As if hypnotized, Mary walked towards the gypsy woman to meet her. The closer she came, the more she was tormented by the thought that she knew her. Suddenly the girl cried out as if struck by thunder. "You! Did you recognize her?" The older woman grinned crookedly, revealing dark, sparse teeth. "Yes, it's hard to recognize me now, and I've only just turned 50. She laughed hoarsely, then coughed hoarsely. "It's really hard to recognize you. But I was young, I didn't really remember you. It's been so many years you've changed," the girl whispered. She could not believe her eyes. From a beautiful, lively, insolent gypsy, Rosa turned into a decrepit old woman with gray, dull hair, curled fingers, once soft, lustrous, tenacious hands, incessantly rubbed a bright, multicolored shawl, carelessly thrown over her shoulders. His face, mottled with wrinkles, had shriveled, and only his eyes, black and radiant, remained alive. And it was this incongruity of eyes and appearance that struck Mary most of all. "Don't try to console me. I know all about me, and I know about you that I came home because I buried my fiancé. He burned to death in 4 months. Where are you from?" The girl was amazed, I know. Rosa coughed again, covering her mouth with the end of the shawl. "He took away my curse and freed you with pain and agony. You'll meet your destiny soon and you'll be happy. What happened to you? 50 years old is not an age. I brought the disease on myself. I cursed you. I committed a great sin, so God punished me. I ruined my health. Never, you hear, never wish harm to anyone. It will come back to you 100-fold. Not all at once, but gradually. I wanted to punish your mother, but I punished myself. God sees everything who hurts whom. Do you need any help? You're kind." A tear rolled down the wrinkled cheek of the gypsy woman. "But I don't need your help. Go, your parents are waiting for you. Hurry to meet your destiny." Mary wandered home, walked a respectful distance away, looked back. The gypsy woman was still standing in the same place, looking after her with her hand, covering her eyes from the sun like a visor. Her hunched figure evoked nothing but pity in Mary's soul, not even anger toward her. "Mary!" Her mother ran out of the house to meet her, embraced her, cried, "Poor you, my poor sufferer, when will all the misfortunes end?" "They're over, Mom." Hugging her in return, said the girl, "I met a gypsy woman at the station. The same one, remember Rosa? How could you recognize her? It's been so many years. You were just a little girl. Has she changed? Maybe I wouldn't have recognized her. She beckoned me to her, like she was hypnotic. She said Jordan had lifted the curse from me. Oh my God, I'm so happy. I can't believe it. Oh, why am I keeping you out of the house? Come on, let's go. My father is worried sick about you. Listen, Father, what's your daughter saying?" Jenna didn't know how to express her joy. "All our troubles are over. The gypsy told her so. Is that old witch still alive? If I'd known what she looked like, I'd have shaken her out of my soul and gotten her to lift the curse from you sooner. Will you show her to me later, my daughter? I'll deal with her. I'll get even for every tear you shed. Daddy, I won't need your help. She's punished herself. She's so sick. What's the matter with her soul? I feel sorry for her. I wouldn't want to be in her shoes. That's what she should do." Father said in his heart, "How can the earth still carry her?" The girl, as the dearest guest, was seated at the table. Behind the conversations, oohs, sighs, the time passed unnoticed. "What will you do next?" "Ask my father. I'm going to get a job. They're waiting for me at the hospital." "Of course they are." Mother snorted. They're always short of people there, and here the whole doctor has arrived. I'm not quite a doctor yet. I have to practice first, but I'm looking forward to going to work. You should at least get some rest. You're all skin and bones. You're not taking care of yourself. I don't want to stay at home. At least I'll forget about work a little, and there and meet a good man. My mother picked up on it. We're not old now. It's time to nurse grandchildren. Mom, I don't want to think about anyone right now. Men have no place in my life, at least not yet. That's not right. Father remarked. A young woman should be thinking about men. No, I've had enough of men. The one I would like to be with is probably married long ago, and I don't need others. I'm fine on my own. Didn't you just say that about David? Asked the mother, looking intently at her daughter. It doesn't matter. Mary was embarrassed. Forget it. I don't want to talk about David or anyone else. I came here to work, not to have affairs. He never married. He became a big man, a farmer. He's such a nice man, the girls are all over him, but he won't let them. That's right. The other day he brought a new tractor. My father told my mother. He's made a good fortune. But he hasn't brought a woman into the house, so he lives alone. Good luck to him, said Mary, and her heart gave a happy twinge. Enough about him. Let's change the subject. And anyway, I'm tired. I want to rest from the road. Tomorrow I'm going to apply for a job. The next morning, Mary went to the local hospital. They welcomed her cordially, told her everything, showed her everything, drew up the documents. Encouraged, the girl returned home. She walked and remembered how she and David had walked along the streets of their village. Mary was thinking so much that she did not notice that a car stopped next to her. A young man jumped out and blocked the road. Mary, hello. She heard the girl. She looked up and shuddered. David was standing in front of her. Yes, her David, the one she loved madly, the one she had driven away, afraid of the curse, the one she had never forgotten. Hello, answered a dumbfounded Mary. She was confused, unprepared to meet him like this. He hadn't changed a bit in the years they hadn't seen each other, but he had grown older, and there was a deep wrinkle between his eyebrows. I'm so glad to see you. The man looked at her tenderly. How are you, Mary? Married? I was. A shadow came over the girl's face. No luck with your husband. He died. She answered briefly. I'm sorry. I didn't know. David was embarrassed. Look, he suggested suddenly. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Let's go to a cafe, sit down, talk. I'm sorry. I don't want to be out in public. I'm not in the mood. Then let's go to the river. Remember where we used to vacation? Okay. Unexpectedly, the girl agreed. David helped her into the car. All the way they were silent, each thinking about his own. David stopped. They got out of the car and went to the beach. They sat down on the rocks, heated by the sun. They were still warm from the evening coolness. How did you get here? The man asked. For a long time? Or just to visit your parents? I've had a job. Nothing keeps me in the city anymore. I got my diploma and came straight here. It's peaceful here, my parents are near, and I don't need anything else. You're still the same. Suddenly David said, turning to her, tender, vulnerable, Yum, I missed you. You know, when I saw you now, I suddenly realized that I never stopped loving you. No woman has ever been able to get rid of the thought of you. Mary nervously rubbed the strap of her bag in her hands. Traitorous tears boiled in her eyes. And you? The man continued after a moment's silence. Were you happy these years? Yes, I was, Mary confessed. But my happiness was short-lived. I still wonder why you decided to break up so abruptly. Were you afraid that I would carry out my threat and not allow you to study and work? I was young and stupid then. I just didn't want you to leave. If I could take it all back, it's not about you. Then what is it? I've wanted to go to your parents and ask them about it so many times. Then I wanted to go to you and demand an explanation, but I did neither, respecting your choice. I felt so bad without you. I even started to drink, but I came to my senses. I'm sorry, I should have confessed everything right away. But you wouldn't have believed me. You convinced me to stay. And I couldn't do it. So why did you leave me? I don't understand. Can you tell me now? It was the curse. And Mary told David the whole story in great detail. He listened, looking at her in horror. Now you realize that I couldn't stay with you or you would have died. When one after another of your misfortunes began to happen to you, I was really frightened. I didn't know which of them would end in tragedy. Then I made a very hard decision to send you away. The girl cried. What could I do? I didn't want to spend the rest of my life blaming myself for your death. It was the easiest solution. Parting is not the worst loss.
Subscribe and click the bell. How good it is to be in a cozy wooden house with a burning fireplace in the freezing winter. When the light in the room is extinguished, the fire, impatiently bouncing on the birch logs, seems like a lighthouse fire, pointing the way to the ships of the stormy sea. When you put a few new fields under it, the stove begins to hum quite a bit, and through the closed furnace door you can hear the crackle of its unburned wood. I looked at the thermometer cheerfully opposite the wooden ones. The temperature in the chamber was steadily rising. The red column had already reached the 15 mark, but it wasn't going to stop, and this despite the fact that it was minus 34 outside. I built this hut 5 years ago. I chose the most remote corner of Belgorodskaya Pusha. I worked all summer alone and finally built what I had dreamed of for a long time. Some women, including my wife, can't understand why I have to go to such a remote place and sit here alone. But that's what it's all about, being alone and away from people. I first offered Adriana to visit my forest hotel, but she flatly refused. The mosquitoes, the cold, the loneliness. Even with me, she preferred the socializing, the girlfriends, the blah, 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 blahs, and the advertising-filled nightlife of the city. I didn't try to change that and philosophically accepted the solitude. My outdoor life is not for my wife. And that was the end of it. The hut stood on the bank of a small river. It was a kind of promontory, which is washed by dark waters on 3 sides. Despite the fact that there were 3 and a bunch of frosts, the river did not freeze completely. And even now in the midst of winter, before me came the sound of a chortle. George's more often on the stones of water. I twisted the wick of the kerosene lamp, and the house became brighter. I relaxed, catching with all my body the heat developing in the room, leaned against the wall, on which hung a blue pelt. No matter how hard Nikon tries to moss the cracks between the ravings, the house still blows through. So I had to hang a rug on the wall, or like me, a skin, right in the center of this improvised carpet on carefully drawn, so as not to spoil. Hanging on the hook was an old but working from a tabletop 16-gauge shotgun. To be honest, I'm not a hunter. I love the subculture, but I have never killed an animal for pleasure in my life. There have been times in my life when I have had to shoot an animal, but only for self-defense or for sustenance. All the horn skins and even the wolf skull that hung on the walls in the cabin, I bought from hunters for entourage. I'm not for bones, and I'm a pacifist, and if necessary, I can shoot even a man. But satisfying my ego by killing animals is not my thing. Being an antique dealer, a lot of interesting things pass through my hands, but as a rule, I sell everything. But the stuff that involves hunting sticks to my hands. Not many people know that a lot of hunting culture items are sold at European auctions. I will not say that they are exorbitant prices, but the cost in money equivalent of some artifacts bites. Much of what is now hanging on the walls of my hut, I bought in Europe. Agree that the hunting culture there is many times higher than in our country. I once went hunting in the Berezniki district. A bunch of scowling men with automatic rifles arrived. The hunters drove several boars at them, which they shot as if from a machine gun, then booed the carcasses, discarding the hides. The final is predictable. General drunkenness, specific individuals of the female sex, and a terrible hangover. No romance, no duel with the wild beast, nothing. Killed, skinned, dismembered, got drunk, got lost and drove off. Littered the forest in the process. That's all hunting. Once at the flea market, one intelligent old man was selling an antique hunting rock from Latin, covered with greenish mortgage rock noodles, natural leather. And hanging on laces. I immediately made a stand. An antique, and more importantly, an infrequent item. The seller asked quite a manageable amount for me, and I did not haggle. Bought this hunting artifact. The rock is needed in hunting to set off the hounds of hounds or greyhounds. Its piercing melodic sound can be heard far away in the woods or field. I didn't have a dog, but I hummed the horn along with my rifle on my elk skins and hide. I threw on the community tunic I had brought here back in the fall, and I went out before going to bed to breathe the frosty air. It was quiet. The silver moon brightly illuminated the tops of the snow-covered trees, trailing a silvery path to my house. I took a deep breath of the icy cold air and coughed. Frost rubbed my throat. Silence. No animal or bird made a voice. Even the cheeky cod-40 lurked somewhere. In the afternoon, even in the coldest weather, the forest is full of life. Saps try to pick under the frozen bark. Bugs huddle together in flocks of nettles, and finches feast on birch seeds. Flocks of crows piercingly cut circles over the pines in search of prey. Small forest birds huddle together on bare branches, trying to hide from the cold and predators in the silence. I thought I could hear the tree branches cracking from the frost. I looked at the snow-covered fir trees and realized that winter had finally arrived. Soon the first real frost would come. I admired the sleeping, gloomy forest, but for some reason an uneasiness grew in me that could not be explained suddenly. I felt someone's unkind gaze on me. I even shuddered with apprehension. I looked around. No one was there. Was I imagining things? God forbid. A rogue bear shows up. I don't want it on my head. I'm used to trusting my senses, or should I say instinct. That animal, subconscious sense of impending danger, it's never failed me. Not in war, not in everyday life. So there's something or someone here. The bright light of the full moon seemed to play on my nerves in a shimmering silvery glow, and charcoal on the blackness. The roses that surrounded the hut seemed to faintly wave their branches like hands changing pose. When was I Morgan? Or averted his gaze from them for a moment and crept closer to the house. With some sinister intent known only to them, I began to dream that the trees around me were whispering among themselves, waiting for a signal, after which they would rush at me and do something terrible. Trying not to look scared, I went back into the house. I locked the front door with a heavy steel deadbolt. By the way, the door opened outward, and it was almost impossible to break it down. And at that moment, a chilling howl came from outside. It couldn't have belonged to any animal I knew. I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of things in my life. But now a chill ran down my spine and my hands trembled. I took the gun off the wall, put a cartridge in the chamber, and pointed it at the door. Then I took the sharply sharpened axe off the rack and leaned it against the wall beside me. Gingerly, I looked out the small window, but saw only a slice of moonlit, snowy woods. My brain played a cruel trick on me, inevitably plunging me into a nightmare world. I would suddenly remember hunters missing without a trace in these parts, and it made me feel even worse. I remembered my grandfather telling me that forest roads become impassable and dangerous in such studio frosts. Only a lucky chance and prayer could save a lonely traveler from the wickedness rampant at this time of year. My hand instinctively stung. A silver talisman in the shape of a spear hung on my chest as well, keeping my fingers on the trigger. I was trying to see something in the small one, and the end of it was peering at the locked door and couldn't decide what to do next. The howling had not resumed, but someone was circling stubbornly around the hut. I could clearly hear the crunch of snow under its paws and the crack of branches breaking. Expectation of danger is much scarier than the danger itself, even if it is deadly, but the visible fear of the unknown. Realizing this, I began to calm down. There was even anger awakened in me. Hell no. Will you take me? I've gotten out of worse. You can't just take me. Suddenly, I wanted to see an unknown enemy. Without an enemy, there is no battle without a battle, no victory. And I ventured warily, listening to the sounds outside the hut. I slowly began to walk toward the door. Well, it was time to gain some certainty, even if it was deadly for me. Holding the rifle by the butt of the neck with my right hand, I pulled back the deadbolt and swung the door open with a kick of my foot. There was no one, only the dark, silent wall of woods that densely surrounded the house and the bone-chilling cold. What was it? An obsession, an unconscious primitive fear of the forest, passed on in the genes through a generation. I went around the hut, but found no one but footprints. I'm not much of a tracker, but I've never seen such big bear-like tracks. They were buried deep in the snow, so they must have belonged to a beast of great size, at least bigger than a bear. What kind of beast was it? I didn't know. No one else had been out at night. But I could smell something cautiously walking around the hut and trying to peer into the small, and the end more like a hospital. I slept badly. I lay half lying down, clutching my rifle and axe to me. Then fell into slumber, then awake. Finally, morning came. I shook my head, trying to chase away the remnants of sleep. What was it? Could I have dreamed it all? I took off my taffet, threw on my tulu, and climbed out of the hut. I looked for my skis. They were where I'd left them, under the canopy, close to the wall. The frost had subsided by morning, but it still clung to my nose and bit my cheeks. The dazzling white winter sun shone in the sky. We had to get out of here and go home. But to do that, I had to walk about 10 kilometers to an abandoned trophy factory. There I left the car. There was no way to drive it to the hut. I went back to the house, filled the stove almost to the point of burning, and began to pack. I hid the rifle in a hiding place from daredevils. Who knows who visits my dwelling without me? I took with me a small, razor-sharp tourist hatchet, which I bought in sporting goods back in Soviet times. I closed the door, put on my skis, and set off. According to my calculations, I should reach that factory in 2 hours. We fastened skis on the frosty snow. We trampled deep tracks. I was rhythmically shuffling my feet, helping myself with poles. The terrain was mostly flat, although a few times I had to roll between small fir trees on low slides. At that moment, my brain woke up again and screamed for all it was worth, a sense of danger. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a movement. An indistinct shadow flashed among the tree trunks. Ahead of me, the forest was closing in on my road, a very convenient place for an attack. Some beast was cheering me silently through the scrap storms. I was almost running. The parade of my breath must have been bigger than steam engine smoke. There was no more strength left. At last I climbed a high hill. At its bottom, at its very foot, protruded out of the snow, the half-ruined buildings of a trophy factory abandoned before the war. I thought I could even see my car on the highway to the small railroad car depot. I was frantically thinking of what to do. Ahead was a gentle slope pulling the highway all the way to the factory. Here and there, the tops of small fir trees and koryak trees were sticking out of the snow. There was no way out. I pushed off with my poles from behind, slid down the slope, fixed my skis on the snowy virgin land, and tree trunks flashed around me. In my head pulse was only one thought, only not to fall. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw how something huge, parachute black with red undercoat, huge jumps, carried Steenie course, turning from snags and sticking out of the snow to her. The plant was rapidly approaching. By inertia, I literally flew into the open rusty gate and braked a few meters away from the car, shaking my skis off my feet. I pressed the central lock button on the remote, yanked the handle, the front doors. The door was like glued, frozen shut. I yanked several times, almost ripping the handle out. No effect. The door wouldn't open. Behind me, I heard the stinking breath of the creature. I pulled out my axe and pressed my back against the car. A few meters away from me stood a huge, scary beast, black in underground hair, a muzzle, something reminiscent of a gorilla. Sharp fangs, huge paws with sharp claws sticking out of its mouth. The beast stood on its hind legs and looked at me curiously. I saw no aggression in its appearance, only interest. I pulled the handle again. The door creaked open a couple seconds later, and I was already inserting the key into the ignition. The engine started at once and charged smoothly, despite the frost. The beast, standing motionless, only tilted your head to the side. I balled my hand across the back seat and pulled a loaf of white bread out of the bag. I rolled down the window and tossed it to the beast. He stood up on 4 paws and leaned over the treat. He touched the gift with his paw a few times and carefully took the bread with his teeth. The loaf instantly disappeared into the toothy jaws. The beast sneezed quite dog-like, turned, and leisurely sank towards the forest. I arrived in the city at night. All the way I was shaking with excitement. It was only when the lights of the suburbs flashed that I was a little relieved. It is now I, remembering the events of those days, so chipper, but then almost went crazy with fear. Driving up the driveway, I did not drive the car to the front entrance, but put it not far from the gate. I had a large lot, so there was plenty of room. I picked up my bag and walked to one entrance, opened the door with my key and entered the hall. Complete silence. I turned on the lights and realized there was no one on the first floor. Strange. What did I want to see? It's almost 2 o'clock. My wife's long asleep. For a while, I stood and admired how the light played on the various films hanging on the walls, real oriental carpets and cold weapons, all that could be brought from my business trip's antique steel. As if lurking in a long barrier of carpets, hiding my deadly power for the time being, I put down my bag and went to the kitchen, poured myself a whiskey, and drank it almost in a volley. Suddenly, I heard a noise. It sounded like someone even shrieked. Anxiety instantly entered my brain. I listened. It was coming from the second floor. I took the broad-bladed sword off the wall and started to climb up the stairs, trying not to knock my boots on the steps. There was the bedroom. I carefully pulled the doors open. Not a bright light burned, but I managed to make out 2 naked bodies entwined in loving ecstasy on our marital bed. My Adriana saddled and unfamiliar Poroshenko Kersey woolly, male and head tilted up, and hoarse from the swell of passion, in a voice almost shouted before me clearly came the voice of my lover rhythmically on his forehead, reading my wife. "I am better than your loser." The male continued, "Yes, you are the best. I love you." I realized it was time to intervene. I coughed in 2. Finally, I was seeing my lover, uncovered, climbed out from under my wife, and stared at me absent-mindedly. "Who is it?" He turned to Adriana. There was disappointment mixed with curiosity in his question. "It's my husband." The wife took a risk and pulled the sheet up to her chin, and the husband almost cheerfully said the male, "Go for a walk. We're not done yet." He scratched his hairy chest and went at me, clearly intending to throw me out of the room. His insolence made my eyes darken, but I quickly pulled myself together. The thought flashed through my mind that he was an immortal. For some reason, it made me laugh. I threw forward my hand with a sword. The blade, with a whistle, cut the air on the face of the male. A bloody streak appeared. No, I struck flat. "I'm not a killer." The hairy lover roared, threw himself at me. I saw it coming, and dodging his straight punch aimed at my face, I struck his hand holding the sword in the jaw. The male roared with teeth, and face down fell to the floor. "Did you kill him?" shrieked Adriana. It's Thomas. His boys will bury you. I didn't say anything. Dialing the police number on my cell phone. Hello. What's your emergency? I got an answer almost immediately. A stranger broke into my house. Help. He's probably trying to kill me. I yelled into the phone, faking hysterics. Then I removed a weighty steel fireplace poker from its stand and gently placed it in his hand. Lying knocked out by the striped guest, Adriana looked at me in silence. The hysteria seemed to end when the lovers' heads were loaded into the car. The familiar captain took me aside. Is that what you mean? That's Thomas. He runs the market. A lawyer's coming tomorrow, and he'll probably be released. He's a vindictive bastard. Could be trouble. Thank you, Sergeyevich. I understand everything. Forewarned is forearmed. I shook the captain's hand. When I returned to the bedroom, Adriana was lying motionless, covered with a sheet. I was silent. My senses were gone. Only an unbearable pain was burning in my chest. Finally, my wife sobbed, returning to her knees and shuddering with her whole body. Adriana. I said the once favorite name with disgust. I'm going to leave now. Make the transmission downstairs so that in the morning when I wake up you won't be here. She started to say something through her tears. But I didn't listen. I quickly left the bedroom. When I woke up, Adriana was still home. She was trying to explain something to me. She was apologizing, singing an old woman's song about lack of attention, about how I'd stopped seeing her as a woman. She even went so far as to say she cheated out of great love for me. She said she'd be faithful to me for the rest of her life, until her deathbed. She said something about being forced into it, but she only loves me. At the end of her monologue, Adriana knelt down and grabbed my legs, begging for forgiveness, but something inside me snapped. I silently listened to this nonsense and wanted only one thing: to get her out of here. When the cab arrived, Adriana stood by the car for a long time, apparently still hoping for something. Then she got into the car and left my life. The next day, an unfamiliar man came to me, a lawyer, young, brisk, young man, with a long nose and long hair in a bundle, making him look like a rat. He leisurely climbed out of a large black SUV and approached my gate. The intercom buzzed. "What do you want?" I asked him rudely, looking at the screen at the uninvited guest. "Mr. Smith." There was contempt in the lawyer's voice. "We need to talk." "I don't need to." "Get out." I waited curiously for his reaction. It was obvious that the lawyer had not expected such a reception. He was silent for a while, then pressed the intercom button again. "What now?" I said unhappily. "Mr. Smith." His voice became much more courteous. "I have business with you. Please let me in." I pressed a button and the gate opened. "Mr. Smith, Thomas wants to sue you for moral damages, but he's a kind man. He wants to talk to you first." The lawyer was watching my reaction carefully. "I have nothing to talk to your landlord about. He broke into my house and assaulted me. I'm the one who should be suing him." I grinned defiantly. "Thomas was invited by your wife. He was her guest. After all, it's her house too." The lawyer wouldn't give up. "I own the house. My wife's not even registered here, so it's trespassing." I looked the guy right in the eye. "I should have just shot your Thomas." "Thomas doesn't see it that way. He's a stubborn lawyer. He wants to meet with you to discuss compensation for his injuries. Tell your master I have nothing to discuss with him. Now get out." I resolutely got up from the chair. The lawyer left silently. But I knew this was just the beginning. My cell phone was ringing. It was a familiar number. "I'm listening." I answered quickly. "I have an order. Are you home now?" The speaker immediately took the bull by the horns. "Yes, come over." Opposite me sat a middle-aged man with a slight shine on his temples. "I need antique Oriental silver. It doesn't matter what region, preferably from the 16th or 17th century." My interlocutor took a sip from his glass. "Coins, jewelry, or dishes?" I specified. "Both." The man grinned, preferably from Afghanistan, or at the worst from Central Asia, India. It can be from India. The man put the glass on the table. But what do you take or not? What is the price of the question? I'm a little tense. The order is complicated in a troubled region. The customer named the amount. I was quite satisfied with it. In what time frame? I asked again. There is no specific term. As it is done, but don't take too long. I agree. But I have unfinished business here. I poured whiskey for myself and my guest. I need help. In a calm voice, asked the guest. I guess so. I took a swig of whiskey, and I started laying out my problem. That's a bitch, life. You barely manage to recover from one blow, and then immediately get another. It's like walking through a storm of evil with your eyes closed at night, and you're scared to open your eyes. Suddenly, you'll fall on a limb, and you'll be left without an eye. That's why you rely on your hands. You cover your face with one hand and put the other one forward so that you don't bump your forehead or nose on the trunk. Have you seen a child's merry-go-round? Everything goes in a circle. Horses, deer, goats. Everybody goes back to the beginning and back again. The next round and on and on. Animals. Carousel. It probably feels like they're moving forward, but they're actually running in a closed circle. That's life. All the events in it repeat themselves with enviable regularity. Someone said that life is a spiral. Everything in it develops in an ascending order. Alas, it is not. At least not for me. A few years ago, I fell in love with a girl who happened to come my way. Her name was Kathy. I said her name, and the sweetness from the volume spilled over my body. How many years has it been? I still can't get over it. I thought she had a crush on me, too. But I guess that was just me. I had to leave urgently. There was something I couldn't put off. I left her the keys and asked her to wait for me. She promised to wait as long as it took. She said beautiful words about love and fidelity. But when I came back, she was gone. In the drawer were the keys to the house and nothing else. No answer, no hello. She didn't even leave a note. I searched for her for almost a year, quit my job, picked up all my friends, used all my connections, but Kathy just vanished into thin air. I searched morgues and hospitals, asylums and prisons, but to no avail. No trace of her. Somehow, in a drunken delirium, I thought she'd come from outer space. There was no other explanation. It took me another year to come to my senses. I never thought it was possible to fall in love with a woman who wasn't remarkable. She didn't have model looks or any outstanding charisma. She was just a girl of many kinds. But it so happened that without her I had no life. But time passed. Gradually her image began to blur. Life in any case dictates its own rules. I slowly began to return to normal. There were orders again, and therefore money. And where there is money, sooner or later a woman starts. That's how Adriana appeared on my horizon, a young, beautiful party girl. She had me by the balls. We met at some party, dedicated. I do not remember what I did not particularly get after the ladies, poured myself, and gradually kicked. The day before I had returned from another business trip, and I had money to drink. I was looking for an excuse to get away quickly. It was unbearable to be among the party, office plankton and major of these girls with fake breasts and one twist in the head. But at some point, a young female character landed next to me. Without entering into unnecessary polemics, she poured wine into my glass, not forgetting herself. "Why be sad?" she asked after we'd had our drinks. I shrugged. I didn't feel like talking. So handsome and all alone. The girl wouldn't stop. "My name is Adriana, and you're the one who's been brought here." That's the first thing I thought of. I had absolutely no desire to spread my tail and start the mating dance. But the maiden did not miss the initiative, seeing that her efforts in them me ineffective. She withdrew to the second line of defense and went on the counterattack. Stupid party. She started from afar, pouring me more wine. It's strange to feel alone in a crowd, What's stopping you from leaving here? I muttered languidly. Call a cab and go. My cell phone was dead. Adriana looked hopefully into my eyes. If you want, I can help you. Those were fateful words, only I realized it much later. Another glass of wine, and now I'm sitting in a cab next to Adriana. No, she didn't come onto me. Didn't get in my pants. She was sitting next to me, just like a caring friend. Then it turned out she'd forgotten the money. I paid off the driver and went up to her so she could pay me back. It was all sewn up in white threads, like the debt couldn't be paid back later or forgiven at all. It was just that I was already drunk and had trouble perceiving reality. In the morning, I woke up in bed with Adriana. I had no rejection. But as long as it happened, so be it. If not Adriana, then some other friend. No difference at all. 2 months later, we got married. It wasn't a big wedding, but it was elaborate, with important guests and a few relatives. We lived in my house. All the property belonged to me. The store and the antique firm, too. We didn't have a prenuptial agreement, but it was impossible to get anything away from me, except for the car I'd given her. But that was a drop in the bucket. We had no children. Adriana took her time. I didn't insist, like I had a premonition. But my wife was head over heels in social life. Girlfriends, parties, going out. But no sign of infidelity. Always home on time. Phone B, he during our life together. No one has ever cut me in the eye behavior Adriana in public without me all rank and noble. And then there's the affair with the market director Thomas. Honestly, I didn't understand why I was younger than her lover. I didn't deny her anything. Sex almost every day, which is what she lacked. I didn't go into the moral and psychological details of married life. Women are a pain in the ass to understand. They say they don't understand themselves sometimes, but the fact of infidelity was, as they say, obvious. No doubt I was worried, but not as much as I was after Kathy disappeared. Resentment mixed with bewilderment, a slight ache in my heart and soul. No matter what anyone says, no husband is ready to calmly accept his wife's infidelity. It is not pleasant to suddenly learn that for several years lived with an empty person on whom he spent the warmth of his soul. They say that between love and hate is a very thin line. Perhaps it is so. I was more than surprised when I realized that the love I did feel was just a fading fire that quickly went out. In the days that followed, as a clown friend of mine used to say, it's not my circus and it's not my monkeys. Well, in the end, I liked the single life better. So with Sam's release, I filed for divorce. And while that was going on, I started getting ready for a trip down south. But no such luck. Adriana was determined to take half my business and my house. It's a well-known fact that lawyers can do anything for a lot of money. My ex-wife didn't have that kind of money, so her lover fit right in. It's hard to say what motivated him, but it certainly wasn't love. Most likely a desire to get back at me for the humiliation and broken face. 2 days later, my lawyer contacted me and informed me that they were filing a lawsuit for property division. I realized that legally they had no chance, so other methods of persuasion would be used. And I seemed to know what they were. A week later, Adriana's nimble attorney set up a meeting to resolve, as he put it, the contentious issues. As I expected, the lawyer was an old acquaintance of mine. Yes, the one who looked like a rat. I brought my firm's attorney to the meeting, not so much to help as a witness. Apparently, the meeting was designed to intimidate me into sharing my property and money with a poor, abandoned woman. I decided to play the fool to fully understand their devious plans. Adriana outdid herself. Black, austere clothes, a veil over her face. She was grieving hard for the family I'd destroyed. It was mostly her lawyer who spoke. He talked at length about Adriana's unhappy fate, about her misstep, and about forgiveness. Finally, he got to the point. Without a second's hesitation, he offered to amicably divide my firm and other property as compensation for my wife's better years with me. He made such a face that I had no doubt what would happen to me if I refused. I sat silent and occasionally blinking my eyes, playing the complete idiot. Even my lawyer shook his head doubtfully and tried to object to the rat, but he immediately shut his mouth and looked at me expectantly. I stood up, shaking off my sucker mask, and said only one word, "No," as I was leaving the meeting room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the rat dialing someone's number on his iPhone. In the evening, 2 big men and Adriana's lawyer came to see me. My security guard escorted them to my office. Of course, the presence of security in my house somewhat discouraged the lawyer. He didn't expect me to be so eager, but nevertheless, he got right down to business. For almost an hour he frightened me with all kinds of consequences of my refusal, but he didn't threaten me directly. I withstood his diarrhea of words and sent him away. From what I had heard, I realized I had to strike a preemptive strike and end this balaghanza. I looked at my wristwatch. 12:30 at night. The landlord's late. Quiet. His family's visiting from home, so we won't be disturbed. I rode in the chair. I wanted to smoke, but the smoke would give me away right away. I can't help it. I'll have to do without smoking for now. I heard a noise from the street. More V's are coming. Well, finally, the front door slammed and heavy footsteps were heard. The door opened and a carcass clad in a black coat came tumbling into the room. I saw Thomas's hand reach for the light switch. No need to turn on the light. My words sounded like the voice of an angel on Judgment Day. The fat man froze and slowly turned in my direction. "Who are you?" With difficulty, he squeezed the words out of himself. "A horse in a coat." I couldn't deny myself a joke. "Sit down. We'll talk." I pointed to the chair across from me. Thomas understood my gesture correctly and slowly lowered himself into the chair. Gradually, he began to come to his senses. For about 20 minutes, I listened to Kareem talk about what Kareem would subject me to for breaking into his house. He even tried to call security, but no one came to his shouting. Then he started talking. I will not recount the text of my monologue. It wasn't very long. The gist of it is that if he gets in my way again, I will cut him off. No, not what you think. Just his head. At those words, I turned on the floor lamp, and Thomas saw right in front of him on the coffee table, bleeding, the severed head of his dog, the head of his favorite marble dog, Hector, as fat as his owner. You should have seen the horror in the eyes of my wife's lover. He seemed to swallow his tongue in fear. The silent scene lasted about a minute. Then his cell phone rang. Thomas pulled out his cell phone with trembling hands. I quickly snatched it up and put it on speakerphone. Someone in a panic had informed Tolstoy, the market director, that the food warehouses were on fire. I looked at Thomas. I thought I was more than convincing. I could have blown up his car for the last time. But that was overkill. I got up and walked out, leaving my master to admire the head of his favorite dog. Walking down the dark corridor, I had to step several times over the bodies lying in picturesque poses, knocked out by the guards' stun guns. 2 dark figures separated from the wall. "Let's go." I spoke quietly. "How's that dog sleeping on its hind legs?" The man in black smirked. "Did you really think I really killed the dog?" "Of course not. I'm an animal lover. But you have to admit, a rubberhead can be pretty impressive too." The divorce went smoothly. I was alone in court, and the whole thing took a little while. In order for a business trip to be successful, you need to prepare, surf the internet, go to the library. Not everything you need for your work can be found online. Wikipedia is nothing but a big virtual dumping ground, where everyone dumps unverified junk. But I didn't want unreliable data and information. My life was at stake, so it was impossible to make a mistake. The frosty winter evening seemed endless. Putting aside Keller's Guide to Antique Oriental Silver, I pampered myself with a Cuban cigar stuffed into the corner of an old leather sofa, a dark lampshade. The floor lamp cast a sharply defined circle of light on the floor, while the rest of the room was hidden in semi-darkness behind the wide glass door leading to the front porch. The frost was crackling, and the fluffy snow in the flower beds shimmered silver, sweat still and full of moonlight. The loneliness did not depress me. I always found something to do, especially when I was preparing to dive into another expedition. And if truth be told, I didn't want to socialize. I was a stranger to my neighbors. I'd disappear for long periods of time, and then reappear. They didn't seem to realize it. I was working, and that was good. Less they know, more they sleep. I smelled smoke, put the chicken cigar in an antique Latin ashtray. I got up and went into the kitchen, poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a pre-prepared glass, threw in a few pieces of ice, and took a big gulp. And at that moment the intercom rang. It was already 11:30 p.m. on the ancient ship's clock. I wondered who it was at this late hour. I reluctantly approached the background on the screen. In the not bright lantern light, saw a woman standing near my gate. She was wearing a dark fur coat and some kind of shawl, tangled up to her eyes. She didn't look like anyone I knew. I wonder who that is. Who do you need a sip of whiskey? I asked into the intercom microphone. I need the owner, the woman said distinctly, leaning her gloveless hand against the brick fence. I had more questions, but I suddenly felt sorry to keep a stranger in the cold. So I opened the gate. Come in on the camera. I saw the woman, staggering, walked to the native porch. Is she drunk? The first thing I thought. The woman with difficulty climbed the steps and was already standing in front of the front door. Hello. I can come in, quietly mumbled the unexpected guest. Come into the hall. I let her in and closed the door behind her. No, I don't think she's drunk. The woman hesitantly walked into the brightly lit hallway and stopped, looking at me confused. I even shuddered inwardly. Large blue eyes looked at me, curious and slightly wary. Take off your coat and give me your handkerchief. The stranger took off the slightly snowy artificial fur coat, remaining in an incomprehensible color woolen dress, which lightened her well-composed small figure, unwrapped on a warm-down coat, handkerchief, and with her eyes began to look for hangers. I, finally coming to my senses, politely took the clothes from her hands to the guest and hung them carefully on the hangers. She dragged the boots off her feet and looked at me questioningly. I was speechless for a moment. Standing in front of me was a charming young girl. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why had she come? These questions swirled around in my head, but I could find no answer. I didn't know many girls in this city, especially such charming ones. I stood silently for a while, trying not to look the stranger in the face. The pause was clearly dragging on. Come in. I'll give you some hot tea. A gallant and hospitable host began to awaken in me. Sit down on the sofa. The girl went further into the hall. Looking around curiously, she stopped near the carpet with weapons, silently looking at the deadly steel and Orsa for a while. Then she looked at me, smiled, and finally took a seat on the couch tentatively in her dress. Leaving my guest in the hall, I made my way to the kitchen, collected the kettle, removed the boiling water in the stock pots, found some carcasses, and all this splendor neatly arranged on the coffee table. The girl carefully took the cup, took a polite sip, and looked at me. So, what can I do for you? I asked politely. Are you Smith, Yuri Pavlovich? Asked the stranger, carefully putting the cup with hot tea on a plate. That's right. With whom do I have the honor? I said in a social tone. I felt like I'd even let my tail wag in front of the stranger. My name is Betty. I shrugged. I have very important business with you. She raised her blue eyes to me. Do you remember Kathy? I choked with surprise. Kathy. My heart pounded traitorously so the girl wouldn't see my excitement. I got up and walked to the window. Man changes with time, but love doesn't die. It can lurk somewhere inside and wait for its time to make your heart beat faster again. But I've really changed. New thoughts, views, passions, sadness, and joy. Sometimes I feel sorry for the old me, but I can't go back. And there's no reason to. I lit a cigarette and opened the window. Outside the window still rained frost and glitter. The fluffy snow shimmered silver under the moonlight, and the hall was warm. The fireplace was burning in the corner. Occasionally there was a crackle and a fierce spark. but for some reason, a chill ran down my spine. "Excuse me, how old are you?" I asked the guest. A tactless question. "Does it matter?" Betty shrugged. "You didn't answer my question." She looked me carefully in the eye. I held her gaze. "Yes, I remember Kathy. She lived here for a while. And then she disappeared without leaving a note." I leaned back in my chair. Memories of Kathy hurt me. I'd been looking for her, but to no avail. That was it, really. I wasn't going to open my heart to a stranger, even one as charming as Betty. The girl was silent for a while, as if deciding whether or not to speak further. "You couldn't find her." It was evident that Betty was struggling to say the words. "Until I met you." Kathy was friends with a guy named Michael. They were getting married. They'd already bought the rings. But then she met you. Kathy lost her head. She fell in love with you after you left. She waited patiently. But then her aunt arrived, your housekeeper. I don't know what happened between them, but she kicked Kathy out. And she had to come home. Michael found out she'd come back, found her and beat her badly. At home, she was abused too, called the town whore. One day, Michael showed up at their house and asked her to marry him. Kathy had no choice, so she said yes. When she found out she was pregnant, she thought it was Michael's baby. For almost a year and a half, they lived more or less tolerably well. And then Michael started looking at the baby, trying to find a resemblance to himself. He got the idea that it wasn't his daughter. He took a DNA test and it all came out. That night, he beat Kathy again. He screamed that she was a bad woman, a cuckoo who slipped him a fattened child. Michael took all his wife's jewelry, even her wedding ring. He beat her almost every day, and she couldn't take it anymore. One day, when Michael was at work, Kathy took the baby and went to live with me in my second cousin's house. I was renting a room in a communal apartment. Michael didn't try to find her. A month later, he filed for divorce. Kathy didn't object. The three of us lived together for almost 2 months. Kathy didn't work, and we all lived on my salary. But we were desperately short of money. So Kathy decided to go to Moscow to earn money. She left the child with me and left. She couldn't take her daughter with her because she was going nowhere. Before she left, she told me about you and that the child was yours. I had some money. I bought her a ticket to Moscow. Then Kathy wrote that she got a job as a waitress in a cafe. That's where she met Sebastian. He was studying in Moscow and was taking his final exams this year. Sebastian started courting her. They know how to round a knave fool's head. Promised to marry. Offered to go to his parents in Latvia. No more letters from Kathy. Where is she now? And what about her? I don't know. But why didn't she find me? I almost screamed. Especially if it's my baby. She knew I was back when she ran away from Michael. She came to see you, but she was met by a young woman who called herself your wife. She kicked Kathy out and said if she shows up again, she'll have to deal with the police. Betty took a sip from her cup. When Kathy got married, she changed her last name. That's why you haven't found her. I was lost for a while. Where's the girl now? I asked when I came to my senses. She's with me. I left her at a friend's house so I wouldn't have to drag her out in the cold. Betty sighed heavily. I wouldn't have dared. But I was made redundant a month ago. Christina and I have nothing to live on. The girl covered her face with her palms and burst into tears. Frankly, I was shocked. I had no reason not to believe the guest. Everything she told me was logical. What do you want me to do? I asked Betty. I want to ask you for some money. We'll go back home for the first time, and I won't bother you again. Betty spoke quickly, as if she was afraid I would throw her out. I've been promised a job. She didn't finish. It was clear to me. It wasn't a job. Are you hungry? Unexpectedly, I asked. She looked at me in surprise. Let's go to the kitchen to get something to eat, and then we'll go get Veronica. I hailed a cab, and we drove almost to the outskirts of town. At the old house, a friend of Betty's had rented a room under a pile of codswallop. We found a little girl. She cuddled up to Betty with her little arms around her neck. "I'm hungry." The baby cried softly. The girl stroked her head affectionately. I tried to take Christina in my arms, but she screamed with fear and clung even tighter to Betty. When we got home, I cooked dinner with Betty's help because I had no idea what a small child could eat. Then I took the guests to my bedroom and put them to bed. I got up early, made coffee, poured myself a big cup, and sat down in the kitchen. I had made my decision overnight and was now waiting for Betty to wake up. Did I believe her? Yes and no. At least I decided to take a DNA test, and then we'll see. I didn't call my mother. She had enough on her mind as it was. She lived with Katya, my niece, so I didn't bother her yet. Betty came into the kitchen, and I poured her coffee and slid her some water and toast. As soon as Christina woke up, we'd leave. She adjusted her dress. "Thank you." Tears came to her eyes again. "What's the matter? Why is that? Do women always cry for everything?" "I'll tell you what. How's your jaw going to work out?" "It's hard to predict. In any case, the baby needs to be fed and clothed. If you don't mind, I'd like to hire you as a housekeeper. You'll live here with the baby. The money I gave you, consider it an advance." I put a card in front of her. "This is for groceries and clothes. Buy whatever you need for your child. Do you have a cell phone?" Betty shook her head in the negative. I slid her the box with the new iPhone in it. "You'll figure it out on your own." She nodded quickly. "My cell phone and the driver's cell phone are already in there. If you need to go anywhere, call and they'll take you. As soon as Christina wakes up and eats breakfast, we'll go to the lab and take the DNA test. I'm leaving soon, and I want to know the results before I go." I said all that in one breath. "So, any objections or not?" Betty shook his head in the negative. 6 days later, the DNA test was ready. I was not the girl's father. Betty read the test results and looked up at me. "God, what are we going to do now?" She sounded doomed. "Don't think. We'll leave right away." "I'm so sorry. I didn't even think it could be like this. I was sure Christina was your daughter." She put the card on the table and went to the second floor to get Christina. "Wait," I slammed my palm on the capital. "What exactly has changed? I need a housekeeper anyway, especially since I'm going away, maybe for a long time. By the way, Lena's coming today. She'll be with you while I'm away. The baby will be enough for you, Betty." The girl looked at me in surprise. "So I can stay?" she said. "Of course you can. You work for me. Everything stays the way it was." I grinned. "Yes, everything repeats itself. A few years ago, I also said goodbye to the girl I loved and asked her to wait for me. The circle had closed. I was about to get into a cab when Betty asked to come with me to the airport. I didn't mind. As I checked in for my flight and headed to the pogrom control area, Betty suddenly kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Come back soon." As I passed through border control, I turned around. 2 girls, big and small, were waving at me. I could see tears on Betty's face. After a 6-hour flight, the plane landed safely at the airport of one of the Central Asian republics. Barely had I gone through all the post-flight formalities and stepped into the welcoming hall, my gaze caught a familiar face from the dense crowd. Jack. I had no doubt that he would be the one to greet me. I raised my hand, signaling that I was seeing an old friend. "Hello, brother." Dressed in a long robe of camel and wool and skullcap, he gave me a hug. "Long time no see." "Hello, Jack. I was genuinely happy to see you. Almost 5 years. Let's go to my car." Jack picked up my bag, and we went to the exit from the airport. We looped through the narrow streets of the ancient southern city. Our car finally pulled into a narrow gate and stopped in the shade of the heat. A young woman, fast server, taken, gave Orhan. Seeing us, covered her face and bowed. Jack said something to her in an unfamiliar language. She bowed once more and disappeared into the house. "Did you get married?" I looked at the woman and turned to my friend. Jack took off his robe and threw it carelessly next to the cushions. But I'm not an old man. I didn't go any further into that subject. We settled around a low table covered with a colored tablecloth. The young woman poured the tea in half and disappeared back into the house. Education, though. Then we ate for a long time, washing down the food with flavored tea. Jack asked about the health of my loved ones. He was saddened to learn of the circumstances of my younger brother's death. "Did you get your revenge?" he asked me. "Yes, briefly. As a man should," I answered. My friend nodded contentedly. Dusk began to fall. The hot southern sun slowly crept over the horizon. The heat began to subside. Soon we heard the cry of my Odin calling to the evening Maghreb. It looked like there was a mosque nearby. While Jack performed the threefold prayer, I managed to drink 2 cups of flavored tea. When it became dark, a silent woman lit several lanterns, illuminating the place where we were seated. From the darkness, the loud rolling of the CKAD and the rustling of bat wings could be heard before us. There is a ruin of an ancient tower not far away. There are a lot of bats there. They hunt at night and sometimes fly in here, Jack said. As if reading my mind, we finally got down to business. I briefly told my friend the essence of the problem, without going into details. Why burden a good man with unnecessary information? Especially since I have to work moderately anyway. There's no point in going. Jack said, wishing with his lips, "It's dangerous to go beyond the river. The teachers are running rampant there now. They hit the Americans well and will soon take control of the whole country. We need to go southeast to Sea Valley. You might find something there. But we can look here too." I nodded in agreement. Very few of their caravans passed through the country beyond the river, so it is unlikely to find anything of value there. But in the Samara Valley you can search. There may be coins and silverware, just what I need. I'll look here, maybe I'll find something. After a pause, Jack continued, "You take my car, gear, weapons, and head southeast. You'll pick up your car papers and gun permit tomorrow." He shouted something into the darkness, and a light came on in the doorway. "Let's go inside and get some rest." Jack nudged me with his hand toward the house. The silent woman led me into a small room with a bed and a small table. A copper basin and a pitcher of water stood on the table. She pointed to the bed and said something. I nodded in response, though I understood nothing. The woman said another short phrase and left. I stripped off my clothes, slept, ran cold water over my face, and laid down on the bed. It was still hot, and I did not cover myself with white sheets, covering my eyes. I lay there and remembered the events of the last time. Too many of them had come upon me. I was awakened by a slight rustle, and the gentle touch of someone's hand on my chest. I wanted to ask who was here, but a soft, lavender-scented hand gently clamped my mouth shut. A woman's light and smooth body came over me. The unfamiliar woman was kissing my breasts, stroking my lower abdomen. From the surprise, I lost my ability to resist, and everything happened. There was no disappointment. The warm southern night, soaked with love and oriental delights, did its work as the naked young woman slid into my arms with a quiet tone. Responding to my kisses in my soul, calm and peace was born for the first time in a while. As I fell asleep, gently cuddling the submissive woman's body, I remembered Jack's words. I'm not an old man. My conscience was at peace. I was awakened by the aroma of fresh emergency coffee. Jack sat squinting into the rising sun, holding a cup of hot drink in his hand. I quickly washed my face and joined my old friend. How restful. Taking a sip, Jack looked at me, Rahim. I haven't slept like that in a while. I tried to catch the subtext in my host's words, but it was as if he was reading my mind. It was Camille. She's a widow. Her husband died in the desert a year ago. It's a good thing they didn't have any children. She lives in my house now. Did she like you at first sight, as they say? Jack added something in his own language. I lowered my eyes. Well, after all, it was her choice. We drank another cup of coffee. Finally, Jack slid a large diamond bag toward me. On top covered a netted assault rifle with a magazine attached. Lying there was a Kalashnikov assault rifle. On the side, I fumbled for 2 fully infected horns. 3 is enough, Jack commented. You're not going to war. In the bag, there was still a knife with a long, wide blade from the old war times artillery binoculars, wrapped in a desert-colored sniper's cape. At the very bottom of the bag lurked a familiar 1911 Colt and a spare magazine with ammunition, ID, groceries, and everything else in the car. You'll figure it out later. Jack stood up. God bless you, Adriana. There was a shriek, and the door showed Camille in its opening. Not paying attention to Jack, she ran up to me and hugged me. As I left town, I was followed by a long scream. The car was rushing down a sun-cracked highway, cutting the red sands into almost 2 equal parts. The road was laid out along an old caravan route. Back in Soviet times, the thermometer on the dashboard read plus 47 degrees. The engine was running at a breakneck pace. The arrow of the temperature gauge was inexorably rejoicing at the 100 mark. I sat in the driver's seat, open warm robe, under which there was only one swimming trunks. It was the only way to escape the heat, and not for long. Periodically on the horizon flashed mountain peaks, and I did not realize whether they were really mountains or ghostly mirages. This wait died less and less often. Through the desert drove cars destroyed from the heat asphalt for metal, wind, and the remaining few gas stations spent on the sides of the road. And all because of the heat, which burned all living things, making the vast desert even bigger. Its sands stretched all the way to the Aral Sea. I remembered Jack telling me that in his childhood in these places gardens bloomed and water rivers flowed. Now all this is in the past. The only source of moisture is seasonal short rains, and even those had long ago lost their unequal battle. The sun was steadily rolling toward dusk, but it was still mercilessly burning the dry air. The desert wind pondered the tops of the sandy velvets, throwing hot sand on the road. The day was leaning towards evening, and I realized that I would have to spend the night in the car. The only thing I was glad about was that with the setting of the sun, the heat would subside, and I would be able to breathe a full breath. The sun was almost touching the horizon when I drove off the highway on more or less level ground, turned off the engine, tired for the day, and started to use things, spread the seat, and put the sleeping bag. Took out of the trunk a stove with gas. I didn't want to eat. I was only thirsty. I quickly lit Gorilka and put a kettle and poured some brew into it. In such heat, locals drink strong green tea, cock tea, as they call it. While the drink was being prepared, I took out of my bag an automatic rifle, took out a cartridge in a cartridge, put it on the safety, and put it on the seat. There was no habitation for many dozens of kilometers around. It was as if I was in space, but you have to be ready for any surprise. Soon I was sitting on the hood behind a glass camel and cat, and was enjoying drinking hot tea and quenching my thirst. Suddenly, the wind picked up. The sky began to nod, clouds not about a new arrow gleamed lightning, and after a while thunder rumbled right above my head. I could clearly see jets of rain appearing in the sky. I was even going to hide in the cabin. But the downpour did not fall on the common land. The rain did not reach the ground, and escaping in the air, thundered a few more times, and only one warm drop fell on my face, still reaching the ground. The wind threw a handful of sand in my face as if in mockery, like a good portion of fine shot. The clouds crept slowly northward and into the sky. First one star shone faintly, the second. And then in 5 minutes I saw the sky covered with meaningless schemes, constellations. The moon's not bright sickle was interrogating everything in dull gray tones. I went to bed early. I opened the windows a little for ventilation. I couldn't sleep for a long time. All sorts of things came into my head, but gradually fatigue took its toll, and I fell asleep. I woke up to a rustling noise. The car shook a few times. I opened my eyes sharply and looked out the window. It was darkness all around. What was it? Maybe a snake. But how big would it have to be to rock the car like that? Suddenly, a wave of black panic and unbridled fear swept over my brain. My body felt like a village. I took a deep, hysterical breath of air and arched my back. By an incredible effort of will, I forced myself to find the flashlight and turn it on. Its light trembled, fading into darkness, still the same dead emptiness. All around, I sat there wet with sweat, feeling my heart tearing out of my chest and my frequent breathing drowning out all sounds. I gradually came to myself. Panic-past thoughts stopped rushing around in my head like frenzied cockroaches. I wiped the sweat from my face with the sleeve of my robe and exhaled deeply. Maybe it was just a dream. I tried to calm myself, slipped my gaze, dedicated to the not bright color of the desert. I spotted something black, quickly dissolved into the darkness. I remembered about the automatic rifle and put it beside me. The caliber is small, but still. Besides, there's also a Colt .45 caliber pocket gun. Feeling the weapon in my hands, I almost completely recovered. I took a swig of whiskey for courage and kept quiet. Listened to the night. There was another rustle. Somewhere not far away, the sand hissed and scattered. But the car stood still, and I fell asleep again. They say that in the most deserted sandy areas of Central Asia there is a Volga, and a good one. It is a meter-long earthworm, dark red in color. It only appears on the surface during the hottest months. The local population is mystically terrified of him. After all, he is supposedly able to kill at a distance, whether spitting out a deadly poison or striking the victim with an electric shock. The legend of it is so widespread and so uniform that one has to think. At its core, it really is some extremely rare endangered animal, probably a relic of ancient times, now surviving in the most desolate corners of Central Asia. Here in the Red Sands, according to Jack, George has also been seen for a long time. He once told me that the worm appears only in the heat of June and July. Later it burrows into the ground and sleeps. The locals were sure that the worm has not gone anywhere and periodically collects tribute with human lives. Expeditions were repeatedly sent to search for the Long George. In 1954, on the territory of Inner Mongolia, worked American scientists on 2 Land Rovers. They left the settlement and disappeared without a trace at the request of the U.S. government. Mongolian authorities organized a search for the missing, found in one of the hard-to-reach areas of the Gobi. Both vehicles appeared to be derelict. 6 corpses lay nearby, as they had been exposed to the sun for a long time. The exact cause of death of the expedition members could not be established. It is assumed that they were the victim of a Long George. In the 1970s, 2 Soviet expeditions visited here in the Red Sands, trying to discover the elusive worm. They failed to catch this beastie, but they collected numerous proofs of the reality of its existence. But the results of the expeditions were not published anywhere, and they were soon forgotten by everyone except the locals. Abruptly opening my eyes, I met dusk again. Apparently, it was still early, but the heat had already gone under the pressure of the night. I tried to recall the dream, but it had already slipped away from me, leaving me with a pinched feeling of unease. The farther I traveled through the desert, the worse the road became. According to my calculations, I should reach the place by evening. The Sea Valley was nestled between mountains that already showed on the horizon in the distance. My gaze picked out a white dot. I stopped the car and pulled out my binoculars into the haze that rose from the asphalt. It was hard to make out the car. There were no people in sight. I decided to drive closer. There was no way to go around anyway. There was sand everywhere, and my car might get stuck. The closer I got, the louder the alarm bells rang in my head. Something's not right here. Just in case, I moved my automatic rifle closer, having previously taken it off the safety. The white Toyota stood with its nose in a pile of sand. The perimeter filled the road. In the cab, dropping his head on the steering wheel motionless, sat a man. His left arm hung along his torso. What was to the right I couldn't see. A little to the left, almost in the middle of the highway, a woman in jeans and a tank top was lying on her stomach. She also showed no signs of life. It looked like she was trying to get away from someone. I just don't know why she jumped out of the car. Maybe she was fleeing from the driver. I didn't hurry to turn off the engine and get out of the car. My brain was working hard, analyzing the situation. How long have they been here? No one overtook me. So they had driven here earlier, at least for a day. In this heat, the cadaveric end comes more slowly, but you can still see that the corpses are stale, and these are like cucumbers, as if just out of the shower. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the driver's arm hanging loosely along the body. There was a barely perceptible tremor. Doubt scattered like shrapnel from a grenade. Ambush. I knocked out the first speed while simultaneously lowering the right window. The car lurched forward in an arc, avoiding the woman lying there. One thought drilled into my brain, just so I wouldn't get stuck in the sand. With my right hand, I raised my automatic and fired a short burst, right at the driver of the Toyota. You could see the bullets fit into his body. He jerked a few times like a rag doll on a string and fell out of the cab. It looked like he was dead. For real now. A gun fell out of his right hand onto the sand, but I couldn't see the model on the left side of the road. There was a burst of gunfire. I could hear the bullets thudding against the side of my car. I stepped on the gas, and then the thing I was so afraid of happened. The car came to a stop, bogged down in a sandy recount. I opened the left door and, firing, rolled out onto the sand. A machine gun line whipped back. As fire burned my left forearm, I felt blood oozing down my arm. But the arm worked, so it was tangential. Did I get a fix on where the shot came from? I got the machine gun in the curves of my arm. I timed it just right when the enemy would try to finish me off, cut him off with a short burst. I didn't know how much ammo I had left. There was no way to get a spare magazine. There was still a woman left. In the silence, only the crunch of sand under heavy boots was heard. I leaned against the car, took the cooking machine, and began to wait. It's like a game here. Who's faster? Finally, I saw a shadow fall from behind the car. The sun was shining in their backs over the sand, and a head in a baseball cap appeared. My machine gun jerked, ejecting the last shell casing, and at my feet fell the body of the woman who had been lying on the road. I sat still for a few minutes, waiting for an attack, but all was quiet. I slowly crawled into the seat and turned the ignition key. The engine started instantly. Everything was normal. I carefully backed up, then took a slight right and pulled the car to a stop after driving through the sand. The wound was bandaged first. It hurt, but had to be tolerated. The wound wasn't dangerous, but I gave myself a shot of anesthetic just in case. I didn't touch the bodies. Couple of days and they'd be gone. There's a lot of dead people around here. I looked at the Toyota, but I couldn't find anything. 3 characters, all lying in the sand, no sign of life. Picked up the gun that had fallen out of the driver's hand, a Barrett 96 nice car. I stuffed the trophy with a full magazine behind my belly belt and walked to my car. Soon a bleak desert landscape stretched on both sides of the road. After 60 kilometers, some buildings appeared ahead. As I got closer, I realized that it was an old caravan shed, miraculously preserved. I drove leisurely under the archway and found myself in the courtyard, where in the center there was once a small fountain with water. I got out of the car and walked under the shade. One of the arches, there were no people in sight. If they were hiding from the burning of the driving sun inside. But the yard was well maintained, and in places the wall where it needed it, or had chipped away. Someone had reapplied fresh clay, and that had dried quickly under the pressure of the fierce light. I looked around the buildings, but there were no people. Maybe no one lives here all the time. Maybe they come here once in a while. The question is, why? As an inn, these buildings themselves, and lived in one of the rooms. I found a few antique jugs, mostly Latin, but there were a couple of silver ones. I threw them in the car. We had to drive to get into the valley by daylight. Finally, The road bumped into the mountains. It meandered between the rocks until it popped out to George's more often than not a mountain stream. It was getting cooler. Instead of sheep, trees appeared along the road. I realized I had reached my goal. An hour later, I entered a small village. But there was electricity and, most importantly, a bazaar. That's where I was going tomorrow morning. I stayed in a small hotel with the proud name of hotel. The room had a shower and a toilet. What more could a companion ask for? I ate some leftover rations and went to bed. The road had washed me clean. The trip turned out to be more than successful. In addition to the order itself, I had purchased something for myself. A day later, I filled 2 more cans of gasoline in the car and headed back. I had to spend the night on the road again, but everything was calm. By the end of the second day, I was pulling into Jack's yard. He did not meet me empty-handed either. I gave him everything I'd brought. The delivery of the shipment was not my concern. It was handled by specially trained men. When I told Jack about my adventures, he faltered his tongue for a long time, expressing either approval or condemnation of my frivolity. Then we drank some chaka, and I went to bed. After spending the night in Camille's arms, I went to the airport in the morning, accompanied by a friend. I didn't say goodbye myself. As they say, long farewells are tears. I had with me a few coins and a couple of funny souvenirs that I found in an abandoned caravanserai. We hugged in silence. I could see the mute question in Jack's eyes, and I knew how much I liked her. But I am a vagabond, a wanderer in life. So it's better to be without a family for now. I shook the hand held out to me firmly. I thought for a moment and took off my talisman, given by my grandfather, and gave it to Jack. Give it to Mina as a souvenir. My hometown met me with cold wind and nasty spring rain. A sharp contrast to the places I flew from. No one greeted me because I hadn't informed anyone I was coming. I picked up my car in the underground parking lot and took my time dragging home. In the 2 weeks I'd been gone, the snow had almost melted, leaving a pile of black mud along the sides of the highway. Overnight freezing. And now the car almost slid on the ice, dispersing the water. The wipers rhythmically swept the raindrops, the light glass. I smoked, letting out the blue smoke through the open window. I felt dreary. Too many women had been around me lately. But for some reason, the memory of the last one resonated in my soul. Camille, yes, she was the one who had captured my heart. But alas, I'll never meet her again. Jack will probably marry her off to some respectable gentleman. I can only wish her happiness. An hour later, I was on the ring road, and a short time later, I was pulling up in front of my house. When I tried to open the front gate, the key didn't work. That's odd. I had recently changed the lock, and everything was perfect. I got out of the car and pressed the intercom button. I was tired on the road, and now I wanted to drink whiskey and sleep. "What do you want?" An unfamiliar male voice answered me. I was even a little taken aback. "I need to get into the house in some stupid way," I said. A minute later, the wicket was in the opening, stood some middle-aged man. "What do you want?" "The owners are still asleep. Get out of here." He tried to slam the wicket in my face, but my brain went into automatic mode, and I came to my senses when the guard flew aside, hitting his head on the brick fence. Yeah, you can't beat skill. I carefully stepped over the man's legs stretched across the path and headed for the front entrance. The glass door was unlocked. I made my way into the hallway and carefully set my bag down beside the couch. I wondered what the other owners were like. I hadn't rented or sold the house. Maybe Adriana and her monkeys had shown up again. I wasn't angry. I was just surprised. Went into the kitchen. Fridge is mine, but someone else's tea set is too bright. I don't like those. Opened the cupboard. The dishes were a mix of mine and someone else's, but only porcelain antique Latin, which looked so beautiful, was not behind the glass. I made coffee and went back to the hall. I should have waited for these owners to wake up. I must have dozed off, because I didn't hear the man enter the hall. "Who the hell are you?" A loud voice woke me up. Above me, an awning rolled in my eyes in surprise. A man in a green from class robe. Next to me stood an unfamiliar young woman and long fingers with blood-red nails frantically typing something on her iPhone. Actually, I'm in my house. I said loudly, "Who are you?" "Who to?" "We bought this house and moved in 3 days ago. The owner and her child went to her husband up north and sold the house to us." The man was seething with righteous anger. The owner is a young woman named Betty, and the girl's name is Christina, about 4 years old. I was beginning to realize what had happened. Betty had tears in her eyes at the airport. "Come back soon." And she tried to slip me a baby. That was a quick turnaround. It was so banal, it made me laugh. They say you shouldn't let strangers into your home. I imagine she got lost getting ready with the money. I, without getting into an argument, went into the study, pushed aside the painting hanging on the wall, opened the door of the secret safe, and took out the documents for the house. Here, read. "The house has one owner, and I'm not married. I'll give you 1 hour to get out of here. I'm getting tired of this, and put the dishes back where they belong. We bought this house. We're not going anywhere. You get out. If you have a problem with it, sue me." The guy was practically yelling, "Girl, call the police." Well, God knows, I did the best I could. I stood up and grabbed the man's nose with my right hand, didn't give him a second thought, threw him out the unlocked door into the street while splashing in the rain. Trying to get up, I walked over to my wife, shooed her away. Without ceremony, the woman nimbly jumped outside. She jumped up to her husband and tried to help him up. I didn't feel sorry for them. From the looks of it, the guys aren't poor, somehow stomping around. While we were stomping around the house, a police car pulled up. Really, they got a pimply sergeant on me. The pimply sergeant even punched me in the stomach a couple times. Consolidating their success, the policemen cheerfully dragged me to the car, shouting something joyfully into the radio station. At the station, I showed my house papers to some important official in civilian clothes. He read the papers for a long time, moving his lips funny, then sighed. "This is a matter for the court to decide. You had no right to throw the present owners out of the house and to engage in violence." I didn't comment on his words and asked to make the phone call I was legally obliged to make. I quickly dialed the number on the other end of the wire, listened attentively, and was disconnected about half an hour later. The door to the office opened with a bang, hitting the wall. The boss sitting across from me jumped in surprise. The body of a man in a Kremlin suit floated into the office. He looked around the room and said, "Joseph." "Joe, I'm Mr. Smith's attorney." The man wagged his chin in my direction. "On what grounds is my client detained?" He tried to forcibly remove him. The warden started babbling, but the lawyer wouldn't let him finish. "My client is the legal owner of the house. It's documented." The lawyer's voice completely filled the office. "Mr. Smith does not have to prove what is already obvious. You are required to release my client immediately." But he beat the victim. The warden tried to interject. "The victim here is Mr. Smith. The men who tried to take possession of his house must leave immediately. And may Mr. Smith pray to God that Mr. Smith does not sue them for the theft of his property." The lawyer waved some paper like a flag. "You're to send a squad immediately and clear the house of invaders." Yeah, specialist, I thought. He should be at the UN. As I left the station, accompanied by my lawyer and a police captain, I saw a familiar pimply-faced sergeant standing by the car. "Just a minute, gentlemen, a little matter." I walked up to the sergeant and knocked him out with a straight punch to the jaw. As he fell, his head hit the side of the police car. His cap rolled off to the side. When I turned around, rubbing my bruised long arm, the lawyer and the captain were looking the other way. The music rolled in waves, almost knocking me off my feet. I sat at the bar and spit my third glass into myself. The bartender looked at me sympathetically. His eyes felt like they were screaming. I also nodded. Suddenly, the mirrored shelves reflected to the point of pain. A familiar face. I even sobered up. "Kathy, was it?" I turned around quickly. A lanky, foreign-looking man was standing next to her, hugging her by the waist. To be honest, I was a little confused. Kathy hadn't seen me, and I decided not to rush to her at once. Something told me I should wait. I turned to Bardeen. He nodded understandingly. He seemed to have seen my ruse. I slowly pulled up my whiskey, trying to follow the couple's maneuver with my eyes. As far as I could see, Kathy was dressed in an expensive outfit. Around her neck dangled a not-so-expensive gold necklace with pants. I'm an antique dealer, and I know what I'm looking at. Paying attention, apparently. My ex-lovers got it all together. Then why is her daughter Christina's baby not with her, but with Swindler and Betty? That's weird. If everything's fine, why doesn't Kathy take her? Or is it just not her baby? The con artist needed the girl to scam me, to make me feel sorry for her, so to speak. This is crazy. All these thoughts were heavy, collectively expressed in my alcohol-soaked head. I couldn't even decide whether to approach Kathy or not. What if she's with Betty? The music suddenly stopped, leaving my ears ringing. I looked at the glass display case of bottles. Kathy wasn't reflected there, which meant they were seated at a table. I cautiously turned around. Sure enough, there they were, sitting in the alcove near the table where Kathy and her boyfriend were sitting. The young woman leaned over and said something to her beau. He got up and walked toward the restrooms. I get it. It's now or never. Hello, my love, I spoke softly, but Kathy heard me perfectly well. You can sit down. Kathy stared at me for a while, stunned, then nodded nervously and looked around, searching for her companion with her eyes. How are you? How are you doing? In a calm voice, I asked. She obviously didn't know what to talk to me about. How's your daughter doing? Have you picked her up from her friend yet? Softly, I asked. What daughter? I don't have any children. Go away. My husband will be right back. Kathy looked around confused again. Who's Christina? I started shopping. Who's Christina? Leave me alone. Kathy blushed. My beloved has not greeted me kindly. And this is the man I've been dreaming of all these years. Although, on the other hand, I probably made up my own fairy tale of unearthly love. Kathy doesn't owe me anything. Suddenly, I was disgusted. I was about to get up when suddenly someone grabbed me from behind by the collar, and I could see Kathy's pupils dilate with fear. I was thrown off the chair and fell, hitting my head on the floor. While I was trying to figure out what was going on, I got a solid kick in the right side of my leg, even though I was drunk. But my reflexes worked, and I managed to regroup. A serious man at Kathy's, only jealous and bad jealous, wanted to kick me again, but I managed to grab him and yank him toward me. The man collapsed to the floor, pulling down the tablecloth and dishes at the same time. Now there were two of us on the floor, not so lonely anymore, but it was time to do the honors. I got up as quickly as I could and staggered to the exit, passing the bar. In the glass window, I saw a jealous woodpecker rushing after me. To be honest, I was getting pretty tired of fighting with him. I let him get closer. Then I took a step to the right, and with a U-turn punched him in the eye, jealously collapsed on his back, obediently headbutting the steps of the small staircase leading to the locker room. At that moment, the music roared and his pitiful squeak was drowned in maddening decibels. But why did I keep getting beaten up? I was feeling so myself. It was a shame that I even brushed away the tear-stained cheeks. I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself sympathetically in the mirror. No one to even feel sorry for me. On the cab ride home, I sobered up a little. And that's not good. I went to the kitchen, took a bottle out of the cabinet, and fell on my favorite couch with relief. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone in the house. Raising my head, saw in the semi-darkness of the hall, calmly sitting in a chair, a not young man. Asked in my temples how he had gotten here. It was the first thing that came to my mind. This place is like a back alley. It's not good to drink alone. Suddenly, the unexpected guest spoke. He took out a Chechen telescope from his coat pocket, a plastic cup, and with a sharp movement of his hand, put it on alert. "I can bring a glass one," uncertainly muttered I. "No need." The man understood everything. I poured the whiskey, and we drank in silence. "What's good in it?" The guest frowned. "Worse than our moonshine." We were silent for a while, until the man got down to business. "You had a very productive trip to Central Asia." The client was very pleased. He lit a thin cigarette without asking permission. "But you will have to go back to those places again." I looked at the guest questioningly. "There is a little business very well paid." The man let out a thin line of smoke from his mouth. "Silver again?" I asked gradually, coming to my senses. "No, not silver. I know about your adventures in the Red Sands." The guest looked for an ashtray. "The one where you encountered the elusive worm. Your story impressed a very rich man, to such an extent that he got the idea to get the trophy." I almost choked. "But I haven't seen it." "That's just a guess." I was surprised beyond belief. "So figure out what it was. Mystical or real." The guest is standing up. "The fee will be..." He said such a sum that my eyes went black. "When do I have to go?" The thirst for profit threw away all doubts. For that kind of money, I was ready to walk to Central Asia. "A man you know well will contact you. He will give you the necessary instructions, help you with equipment and necessary outfit." "When will he contact me?" "Take your time. All in good time." The guest began to button his coat. "Just a moment. I have a favor to ask of you." "I'm up to." "Yes, sir." The guest looked at me curiously. I told him about the recent events in my house and my assumptions about the people involved. The man listened to me and asked, "And what do you want?" "To take money from the crooks." "No, it's not my money. You can keep it as a fee." I looked my guest straight in the eye. "I'm interested in the child. Who is he, and where is he now? It's ungodly to give a girl hope and then give it back." "All right. I understand you." The guest didn't let me finish. "What to do with the crooks?" "At your discretion," I said. The man turned and disappeared behind the front door. As of recently, I have a vintage radio waves in my office, a Minsk 61, made back in the 1950s. I took the receiver away from my mom when she persistently started complaining about the glut of old junk. There's a beautiful lamp in Rhodion in working order. It had been bought by my grandfather, so it came to me as a sort of inheritance. It now stood on the vintage pedestals to the left of the table and delighted the eye with its perfect forms. Yes, people knew how to make good things in their time. Time flies fast. Already the radios of the 60s are becoming antiques. What's up with receivers, equipment from the 70s and 80s? Now, in the antique trend, I am very often approached by fans of tape recorders of the late 80s of the last century. Ask already, and seeing the equipment of the early 90s, VCRs, analog camcorders, tape recorders. Even 30 years ago, we used this equipment, believing that it could not be better. And now it's gone vintage. Turntables are probably next. Apparently, every generation sooner or later starts to feel nostalgic for a bygone time, and maybe even without realizing it, looking for things that can at least for a while bring them back to their past. To be honest, vintage radio equipment is not my profile. But more and more often, I started to think about opening a special department in my store dedicated to this topic. For some reason, it seems to me that this direction of antique business is very promising. I cozily settled in an armchair, pulled out of the bowels of the table, typing a bottle of Jameson and Nakatala, a 2-finger glass of the amber beverage. What to do? There was no question. If there is a Rhodiona, one should listen to her. I looked out the window. It was snowing, which is not quite typical for April. Large snowflakes were beating against the window like frozen butterflies, trying to make their way to the hot cabinet. I felt cold, and I stood up and closed the window. A toggle switch clicked. The settings dial lit up cheerfully. I remembered how in my distant childhood, including Rhodiona, I had felt inexpressible excitement. One inscriptions on the school at the construction site were worth what? Tirana. Prague, Moscow, Ljubljana, Berlin. The names of unfamiliar cities sounded to me like a pass to an unknown world, and the announcers, broadcasting in unfamiliar languages, seemed to me good wizards, counting their spells. I pressed the DV key for about 30 years now. Almost no one broadcasts on the long and medium waves. Once the bands were bursting with the number of stations. Today they are silent with occasional crackles and sounds that are not dickish. Finally, the melody of a sentimental French Schlager of the 60s poured out of the speaker. It was a wonderful time for girls with natural breasts, rubber band stockings, short skirts, spyglasses barely covering, and panties. I even clutched at the nostalgic memories, clearly picturing a time I knew only from old magazines and movies. The French chanteuse was replaced by an upbeat Chuck Berry hit. Women are bloodthirsty cats, but it's boring without them. Chuck assured me. Yeah, boring as hell. I thought about it and decided to take a closer look at the things I'd brought back from my last trip. I took 2 packages out of the desk drawer and laid them out neatly in front of me. One of them contained an antique dagger with a handle covered in silver and worn from time. When I pulled it out of its sheath, the weapon fell into my hand as if it had flown in. It seemed as if it had been made especially for me. In the other surtout was a small figure of a cat-like beast made of unknown material. It was probably carved from stone and covered with bronze paint. Its muzzle with an open mouth looked very spectacular. In the eyes of the predator were skillfully inserted black amethysts, a very rare variety of this semi-precious stone. The finest carvings, hundreds of tiny touches, all of which made the sculpture of the beast almost lifelike. Half-bent, back paws, pinned ears curved like a spring spine. It seemed as if the predator was about to deliver a swift death blow to the head of the raptor. A blood-red ruby was inserted, which seemed to set off the beastly nature of the figure. I wish I knew how this masterpiece ended up in a dilapidated caravan shed. I set the figurine on the stone shelf and put the dagger in the table. Maybe someday I'll hang an antique handmade rug in my study and place an antique weapon on it. As I drifted off to sleep, it seemed to me that the beast on the mantelpiece was ravenously removing the treasure with its teeth. The next morning I received a text message with the address. I scribbled it into my notebook, knowing the message would be gone in a minute. I took a long smoke, settling my gaze into the wall. Well, nothing teaches me anything. My life is always getting in the wrong way and always ends, as usual, with black ingratitude and hatred. And I'm going to hang on to a burden that I'll have to carry for the rest of my life. And on the other hand, there's no other hand. What's that girl to me? Who is she to me? You can't save and warm everyone. So that's her fate, and there's nothing I can do about it. Besides, where am I supposed to put her? I live alone, and I don't have any babysitters. I'm relieved. I finally made the right decision. In my life, I've learned one thing very clearly. Most women, regardless of age, are monstrously ungrateful. My car was traveling down a dirt road, periodically dived into shallow puddles, breaking the wheels, thin ice. It had been freezing since the night before, but it was already clear that spring has won the tedious winter. In an hour, the sun would warm up, and the ice would melt, and the road would turn into impassable swamps. Soon a one-storied barrack, with the walls eared from time and rain, appeared from the turn. I pushed open the shaky doors and stepped into the dark hallway. It looked like the structure was uninhabited, but judging by the voices carrying all from one of the rooms, there were people here. I approached the lantern door, leading into one of the rooms, and without removing my gloves, I turned the knob. The odor of rot and cigarette smoke hit my nostrils. Across from the entrance, a table was piled with smoke, leftovers, and empty bottles. Dropped his head on his folded hands, sat half-undressed woman, 2 men homeless. They were arguing loudly about something. When I opened the door, all these picturesque characters stared at me in amazement. Even the woman with difficulty, but raised her head. "What do you want?" Coughing, one of the men in a dirty dress dressed on a naked body. "Where is the girl?" Trying not to breathe the unbearable stench, I asked loudly. Was Christina here yesterday? The uncle seemed to have a bad hangover. He pushed the woman. Hey, what's up? Where's the girl? What do you need her for? Missed the woman, looking at me, swollen with lice from drunken eyes. I ignored her question. On the iron bed against the opposite wall, did someone stir? One of the men nodded at the pile of filthy crap. Here she crawled out from under the rags. She didn't even have the strength to cry. Probably those bastards hadn't fed her lately. I gently lifted the girl up, and she like a kitten trustingly nuzzled her nose into my coat. Leave it. The woman tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't hold her, and she fell back on the stool. I'm taking the girl. I honestly didn't care who Christina was. What do you mean? I'm taking her. The first man reacted. We fed her, clothed her, raised her, for nothing. I threw some bills on the table. That's enough. It was visible how all the members of the collective's eyes flashed greedily. Dressing the child in a coat, I went out to the car, put the girl in the back seat. Asked, do you remember me? She nodded.